Your ears must have been burning.
I said to Tom, I said,
We want to pay him money to come.
What's she think? Same complex.
We're during the budget.
you know what, I just, thank you for your time. I don't need any more. How you doing?
What's one more?
It's okay.
Oh, it's swell.
I'm here. I got it. So, the frustrating part to me is I stole your pencil.
It's okay, I got a pencil. Can I have your pad?
Take the pad. I'm still writing on this one.
It's yours. Money.
Been out for about 3 months. I had a hip replacement.
I was gonna say, you got a new friend there.
Carry on for the year. I got the hip replacement. I'm glad it happened. I finally did it.
I'll be right back.
I think you're leaving at the right time.
Well, Walker,
You hear my report, you know why I'm getting out.
Yeah, that's right.
Larry, how are you, Mike?
an old man.
They won't let those guys.
Right.
That's right.
Anyway, but I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Over there. I wasn't sure they moving around.
Special meeting is more.
How do you spell your last name?
The last one was apparently some people don't want to give them a little bit more money.
Somebody could use it.
This way we're getting closer to the chair.
You're crazy.
How are you? Good, sir. How are you? Good. I looked for you. I was in Sam's Club. I looked for you.
Oh, yeah?
A lot of rock.
So we're gonna spend.
You didn't say a word.
Yeah.
Yeah, the debt, the student debt.
Student loan.
Student loan debt, yeah.
I try. It doesn't always.
Get rid of the student debts, you'd probably be happy to do the work.
That's right.
Nice to meet you.
Not in the floodplain.
Yes, I've heard of you. I hope I heard of you. So I work at the
And I was just going to say, the higher you get and the ledgier you get, the bigger the houses get.
I'm like Avery. I'm like,
Judy.
Yeah.
didn't realize you were.
Yep.
So you're representing.
I don't think so, because that's
He's taking a lot
citizen
of the
member
complaints.
issue.
With the customer.
Yeah. Well, I've been
My head
doing
down.
that.
It's for the complaints to go.
Yeah, I've been in the
Apparently
West
that's what people do, they call their local
Well,
commission.
I have 20 acres, but it's all rock and swamp, so you can't build on it.
Calls and complaints all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard I have a long.
I've had people come up to me at
Oh.
and they just
I still feel
The
different.
process of expenditures.
at a public meeting
Sure,
what's
sure.
actually going on.
Finance
You know,
first.
they're happy, that's what they want. I have to say, I hear a lot of
You guys, Hartford has
negative comments here from commissioners about Hartford.
a representative.
Bothers me on a personal level.
And it's whatever one goes.
If they were the state capitals and half their property was
I got
tax rolls, they might feel a little bit different.
You ready?
A lot.
The board, please come to order. Board, please come to order. Clerk, please read the roll.
Adel. Avedisian.
Yep.
Buell. Camilleri. Curry. Bella.
Here.
Galligan. Cardo.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Hoffman. Holloway. Yono.
Here.
LeBeau. Lester. Magnan. Mandic. Murata.
Here.
Osgood. Payne.
Here.
Patel.
Here.
Salemi.
Here.
Salmonides. Sweezy.
Here.
Taylor. Torres, Zeno.
Here.
Carrier. We have a quorum.
Okay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a new commissioner, and we're swearing in.
That's Commissioner Jacqueline Mandic.
Close enough.
Raise your right arm. Do you solemnly swear that you will faithfully uphold, according to law, your duties as a commissioner of the Metropolitan District of Hartford County to the best of your ability, so help you God?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of the July 1st, 2019 meeting. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'd like to abstain.
And I'm sorry, I should have asked for abstentions. One abstention. Public comments relative to agenda items.
Judy Allen, West Hartford. The Board of Finance failed to pass the resolution that would continue the funding above the $50,000 for the independent consumer advocate. I would hope that the full board takes this up and passes a resolution. As a consumer, I am very concerned that if the consumer advocate runs out of funds during the budget process, that I as a consumer will not have an advocate for me through the entire budget process. I don't think that our consumer advocate should work for free. There is a lot of work that he does. The statute allows for you to increase the amount, if it's necessary, to $70,000. The legislation creating this position passed unanimously. Obviously, the legislature believes that this is crucial for consumers of the MDC. Thank you.
Further comments?
Good evening. My name is David Silverstone, the aforesaid independent consumer advocate. I want to speak to item 9A, the fund balance policy. That received a vote on the Board of Finance. After a spirited discussion, I would ask, for all the reasons I said earlier at the Board of Finance meeting, but primarily that you hold off, you defer action on that. Exactly what level that should be at, how that competes with other funding requirements such as OPEB, which the PP&I committee deferred action on. But I think you want to look at all these various demands on resources, if you will, as a whole. And I would ask that you defer action on the fund balance policy until you have the whole picture in front of you. Thank you. And that whole picture can be provided during the budget process. Thanks.
Matt?
Good evening, everyone. Matt Hart, Town Manager, Town of West Hartford. Got two items I want to bring to your attention quickly. First of all, though, I'd like to thank you for the good work that you do on behalf of the region. First point I would like to address is the proposed fund balance policy that's on your agenda for this evening. I understand the importance of developing and maintaining a policy. I've been involved in working on a few myself with my municipal career. I do take issue with one of the points that Hilltop has made, and in purposes of full disclosure, they're the town's financial advisor as well. With respect to the revenue volatility component, I think the fact that the MDC has only 8 taxpayers is actually a strength as opposed to a weakness. Unlike the towns, you're not in a position where you have to chase thousands of taxpayers. You only have 8, and your collection rate is 100%. So I certainly take issue with that component. And I think the fact that you collect both fees on the water side and taxes on the sewer side puts you in a different position from many of your peers. And arguably, you are not as vulnerable as many of your peers. So I wanted to bring that to your attention and think you should look at that issue in the context of setting the overall percentage for the fund balance policy. In my view, the proposed target is somewhat too high. Also concerned on what the impacts would be on the member towns. If you have a tough year and your fund balance falls below the target, would there then be a direct contribution from the operating budget to restore fund balance, and would that come from the member towns? That's an outstanding question that I have that I would like to see you address this evening. And then my second point is I also support the work of the consumer advocate. I have found him to be an invaluable resource for me as a municipal manager. I think he's a great ombudsman and a liaison for you on a whole host of issues, including citizen complaints. I have found his work to be extremely valuable there. So with respect to funding his work, I would certainly support any request that would be needed to make up any shortfall there to allow for his complete participation in your activities. Thank you for your time this evening, and again, I appreciate the good work you do.
Further comment? Okay. Report from the district chairman. There's one item which the chief executive officer will take up relative to a relationship that we are having a discussion with. You'll take that up in your report. A report from the chief executive officer.
Thank you. I apologize. It's a late night and we have a lot to talk about. One thing, and I think Commissioner Taylor raised this issue in our PPI meeting, where staff is getting really condensed in terms of bringing issues, or the board bringing issues to staff. And so in the budget season, we're going to need more subcommittee meetings, unfortunately. We just can't fit. We got too many agenda items to talk about. So we're going to be proposing a number, especially starting with budget, a number of workshops and a number of different discussions with PP&I. So that's just looking forward. I would like to just mention, and we're going to bring this, and I haven't even had a chance to talk to the chairman, Vecino, for BPW, but we were approached by UConn and their consultants as a collaborative approach. The MDC has a major issue with what we refer to fats, oils, and grease, the FOG program, and it's basically a program that's been mandated by the state of Connecticut and other municipalities to deal with literally fats, oils, and grease, which really is a derivative of restaurants and that kind of discharge. You cannot imagine the amount of money and time that the MDC spends in cleaning and re-cleaning our systems, because whether it's a restaurant that's in violation and not properly dealing with their FOG, whether it's we're issuing fines, which the board approves. I believe it's $90 for fines. A lot of work, and I'll just give an example. When Adrian's Landing was built in 2000, as you cross the highway, we have 2 siphons that go under the road, and that siphon is simply what you'd refer to as as like your P-trap in your sink at home. And there's just a simple 1 foot difference in elevation, and it allows the water to flow under the road and come back up, and it provides the velocity to get the water to the other side of the road. We have spent in upwards of $300,000 a year just to clean those siphons. Now we're talking about a 72-inch pipe and a 54-inch pipe. And so this is a major issue. So in our discussions with UConn and their consultants, they have proposed, it's really more of a fog awareness program and utilizing the college students to actually promote fog awareness. And so what we're looking to do, and we'll be bringing this to BPW, would be that the MDC would benefit by simply going out into the communities and collecting the fog before it gets flushed down the toilet. And what we would propose is we will actually buy the truck that would collect the fog, and the UConn students would be the one to actually drive the truck and actually go get the fog. So there's a lot more details that need to go into this, but I thought it was appropriate because I've been talking to UConn over the last couple of days. We are going to bring it to BPW for Commissioner Facino's review and talk about how this program would actually work. So it's a very positive thing. We're looking to get the fog out of the pipe and collect it before it tries to get transmitted to the plant.
Number of students they were talking about. So 3-year.
Yeah, it's there's a lot more details to go to it, but yeah, we're looking at utilizing the UConn staff, students to actually drive the trucks, and we'll get into the details at BPW. One initiative that our chairman and vice chairman, Bill DeBella and Maureen Magnan, have asked me to implement was what we refer to as a speaker bureau for the commissioners. And really the concept of the Speaker Bureau was to allow a program that could be fluent and could be utilized to educate the commissioners on specific topics that need to be addressed at a town level, town council level, but also for the commissioners to be able to speak to staff to say there's a specific issue that is not being addressed publicly that we believe needs to be addressed. I've heard this from numerous commissioners that we as engineers probably don't, and I know East Hartford council meeting last year was a volatile one because we don't really have a good sense of taking lots of technical data and concising it into a format that the general public can understand. So what we have done with Julie and Nick is we've developed this program with our consultants, and I've got 3 videos, and there's actually 4 videos, but we've shown this to Commissioner Magnan, we've shown it to the chairman, just to show you how we're trying to use videos to simplify a message, to not so much educate the public on the entire topic, but to broach the topic on a subject so that the public can ask more questions, and we can use that as a way to inform the public and get them engaged. So Nick's going to run 3 videos and then a 4th video, which is just more of a communications piece on the tunnel.
Okay, so they're actually all going to play right in a row. So just for the commissioner's benefit, the video is on just basic the water, wastewater, ad valorem, and as Scott said, the 4th video is focused on a construction update for the tunnel.
Just like the air we breathe, we need water to live. Providing drinking water has a cost. So what exactly are you paying for in your water bill? Every day, the MDC reliably provides nearly 50 million gallons of pure, safe drinking water to approximately 400,000 people. Your drinking water comes from the Barkhamsted and Neepauk reservoirs, which hold 40 billion gallons of water. Over 31,000 acres of MDC watershed land safeguards the reservoirs through source protection and forest management programs. Additionally, the MDC annually conducts over 100,000 tests on your drinking water, treats it before delivering it to your home, and works to maintain 1,500 miles of pipe in the distribution system. The MDC also operates popular recreation areas on portions of its watershed land. From maintaining our watershed to ensuring the highest quality water standards, a significant amount of work goes into bringing you this precious resource. Learn more. While safe, quality drinking water is a necessity, so is the removal and treatment of wastewater. The the MDC's ratepayers fund these services through portions of their property taxes and water bills. Millions of gallons of wastewater flow from homes and businesses through over 1,200 miles of sewer pipe maintained by MDC to our state-of-the-art treatment facilities, where over 20 billion gallons of wastewater is treated annually. Through the Clean Water Project, required by the federal and state government, the MDC is making improvements to the sewer system to minimize overflows and backups during heavy rains. When completed, the project will benefit the health of our customers, local waterways, the Connecticut River, and ultimately Long Island Sound. Providing reliable, pure drinking water is a portion of MDC's service to our customers. Improving and maintaining sewer infrastructure and treating wastewater are equally valuable services for our customers and the environment. Learn more. I already pay an MDC water bill, so why does part of my property taxes go to the MDC? In addition to providing quality, safe drinking water, the MDC provides sewer and wastewater services to its member towns. The cost of those sewer services is billed to the 8 MDC towns through a tax called ad valorem. To determine your town's share of ad valorem, the MDC takes a 3-year average of the property taxes collected by each town. It then divides the total amount of ad valorem proportionally among the towns based on those averages. Your town passes along ad valorem by dividing it among all property owners and adding it into your property taxes. Ad valorem pays for the MDC's wastewater and sewer services. The wastewater system includes sewers, which collect wastewater from homes, businesses, and industry; sewer pipes and pump stations that transport wastewater to MDC treatment facilities; treatment plants, which clean wastewater to be safely discharged into waterways like the Connecticut River. Funds collected through ad valorem pay for the inspection, repair, rehabilitation, and cleaning of sewer lines, along with the operations, maintenance, and improvements at the wastewater treatment plants. These activities, and the ad valorem that funds them, are crucial for a properly functioning wastewater system, which protects the health and safety of everyone in the Greater Hartford region and benefits the environment. Learn more.
We're digging a tunnel. We've got a 4-mile tunnel that we're digging about 250 feet deep beneath the city of Hartford. We're about a mile plus into this 4+ mile tunnel, so we've got 3 miles to go. We're building our tunnel totally in bedrock. It's hard stuff, but the tunnel boring machine was actually constructed in Germany and shipped across the Atlantic to this site, dropped in this hole just for this project. We've got over 100 people working here, 3 shifts a day, we're mining. Biggest challenge, getting started. Getting everything to work in sync can be quite challenging. Getting the machine in the hole, getting the machine put together, and then actually starting it up and getting it moving. This project's been going on for about 3 years. We've really only started drilling in earnest this past 6 months or so, but they've removed about 165,000 tons of material so far. This is a huge project and it's great stuff. This is a once-in-a-lifetime project for an engineer. This is as good as it gets.
Thank you, Nick. So the importance of this is having a mechanism through the Speakers Bureau to actually take a topic, whatever that might be. We've already gotten feedback from our lobbyist, Janice Fleming, as well as Commissioner Magnan, on other topics. We talked a lot about ad valorem and 2 of those, and we know budget season's coming, and fair comments by Mayor Cantor was, and it's true, people don't understand that we actually are the sewer company. They understand we're the water company, but they don't understand we're the sewer company. So that's just a way to broach the topic, to explain to customers that we actually do provide a service, and how does that get paid for. So moving forward, we're going to be having a community affairs meeting in mid to late September. Hopefully, would develop a subcommittee which would give staff feedback on what and how we approach these different topics. We're planning to utilize these videos in a number of different ways. Facebook, targeting Facebook, our customers through Facebook, and also public television and the customer service building, as well as hopefully putting these in different areas, different kiosks at our town halls, those kinds of areas. So it's just a starting point, and
Yeah, I think Scotty made it fairly well. This is to be a larger process of getting our message out by our commissioners, by our staff, not only to the town councils, but other community groups that would request information from the district. So it's not the same person going out, it's the people that are representing those communities, and they're delivering the message of this district board and what we do as an organization. And hopefully it will be large enough to build on its own, where we have more community groups soliciting information from us, and it's being delivered by the 29 commissioners and the 5 non-voting members. So that's what we're trying to do, is promote that kind of a community involvement in the public relations and public information system by our commissioners and our staff. We're necessary to be supportive of commissioners when they go out to make presentations or respond to questions in the community.
Great, thank you. Next issue I'd like to talk about is just a little update on the Glastonbury water petitions, requests for water in the town of Glastonbury. As most of you know, we had our first public hearing on June 26th for the Coleman Chestnut Hill area. And then we also had another public hearing on August 26th for Old Wood area. And then recently, August 28th, for the public hearing to approve the project for the first project area, which was the June 26th, I think I said August, but June 26th petition. So what the decision out of that was from the chairman, Commissioner Sweezy, was to put a 45-day hold on which resolution was passed to allow for further investigation of possible other funding sources, either from the state or from the town. The one point that was made in that meeting, which was very important, is, and I think Commissioner Taylor made this very point about the Niagara circumstance, was that the MDC got beat up pretty hard over Niagara trying to support the program in Bloomfield. And there's winners and losers when it comes to assessment processes. Some people want the water desperately. They need the water desperately. The uranium levels within their wells are well above the drinking limit by the state of Connecticut DPH and EPA, and they're destitute. And then there's some people who do not want to be assessed. They do not want the water line in front of their homes. They don't want to pay for it. They're okay with the water being brought to their neighbor, but they don't want to have to pay for it. And unfortunately, that's not the way our assessments work, and the way approximately 102,000 customers were assessed over time. So it's a very volatile discussion, but the decision was to put the petitions on hold for 45 days and come back to the Water Bureau with some more information regarding possible other funding sources. I have talked to the town manager, and they are meeting, I believe, Tuesday night, Commissioner Osgood, and they are going to be talking about this topic, obviously, and whether or not the town can or will support any portion of the project at all. So we'll wait to hear what happens. And Commissioner Osgood, if you'd like staff, if you think it would be helpful for us to be there, be more than happy to be there. It's up to you on the town. But we are looking for, one of the areas in this project area has actually got a consent order from the state of Connecticut DPH. It's a community well, and they have to do something. And there's really not too many options except provide public water from a public water source. drilling wells with the levels of uranium and pesticides is not a real solution. So I just give that as an update for some of you who may or may not have been involved. The next topic that I have is the integrated plan, and all of you are very familiar with where we are in our submission that we submitted to DEEP in December of 18. We did receive a response from our submission on July 25th of this year, which is approximately 7 months later after we had started the process. And basically what the letter said, and I did send that out to all the commissioners, so everyone should have it. If you don't, we have copies. The important part of that letter, there was a number of technical issues that we are going to address, but the very important issue that was raised that I responded to on the 8th of August was that the feeling was that the MDC did not comply with the format required under the consent order. And so my response was very clear that we believe we did. We had 2 specific meetings with DEEP leadership and staff in August and in October of 2018, and basically agreed on what the format would be, not only in terms of how many volumes that would be developed, but also what was actually in the volumes. And then there were 40 technical meetings throughout the development of the integrated plan, and DEEP staff attended 17 of those meetings. And in 2 of those 17 meetings, again, 2 PowerPoints that we provided clearly identified what the format was, how many volumes, and what was in each volume. And so I'm just going to give you an example of the concerns, was that we had basically 3 volumes, and one of the concerns from DEEP was that the affordability analysis was in volume 3. And that's just one of the comments. Our position is that in all 4 of our PowerPoint presentations, we clearly showed the 3 volumes, what's in each volume, and the fact was that the affordability analysis would be in volume 3. So that was basically my response to that initial complaint. We believe we complied. I do know that DEEP, they have said to us verbally, they might agree with the integrated planning approach, but they don't agree with the time frame in which we would achieve the integrated plan. The challenge that we have to educate DEEP in this, and we're going to have future meetings to go through these details, is you can't, in one hand, agree with integrating planning that Congress approved. One thing that we have is January of 2019, Congress approved as part of the Clean Water Act that you would consider integrated planning as part of a long-term control plan. So the challenge that we have is integrated planning by its nature means that you're going to consider multiple priorities, not just consent order and consent decree priorities. You're going to consider water and storm and all the other things that we have to pay for, because the same group of individuals are paying for everything, meaning our water rate payers. So what we're trying to do is convince DEEP that the only way you can actually develop and execute an integrated plan is to have enough time to do it. And we have proven that trying to separate the sewers in Hartford in a very short time frame doesn't work. And that's why we went back to the tunneling. So we're going to be working with DEEP. We've got a lot more technical questions that we have to answer, but we wanted to make the board aware tonight before we actually had those meetings moving forward on the integrated planning with DEEP. So we will come back and bring a full update to BPW at the next BPW meeting. And we're going to be scheduling meetings with DEEP staff to review their technical concerns. We are very confident that we complied with our consent order. If just for example, our consent order said that you must complete the clean water project by 2029. One of our options, which was option 1, which was to just complete the long-term control plan as it was, which was to build a tunnel downtown and to the north branch of the Park River. We included that as part of our submission. It does comply with the 2029 date, except for a 3-year delay just because of the approval process. So our proposal does in fact comply with our consent decree. We don't recommend it. We don't recommend to build option 1 because of affordability, but DEEP could choose to select and require us to build option 1. So we are in compliance. We're hoping to work through those issues with DEEP and their staff over the next couple of months, and we'll be updating BPW as well. Something that another issue that Nikki, do we have the slides for this? Another issue that, as you have heard, was besides our issue at the landfill with the groundwater, and we've been, updating you month to month on where we are with the contaminated groundwater and the fee structure that has yet to be paid by the state of Connecticut, DEEP, which controls the landfill. We were also made aware of a new issue through the events that occurred at the airport. So if we go back in time, we remember last summer, we were actually debating with the state about not only what they're discharging in terms of the chemical compound of what they're discharging, and are they or aren't they complying with their permit, and their permit's issued by themselves and it's unlimited, so you can't violate the permit because the contaminants that are in the permit have an unlimited amount that they can discharge. But we had a discussion about are they in compliance, what is being discharged to our system, and how much is being discharged to our system. So that occurred in basically June through the summer of 18. Through those discussions, there's a lot of letters that you all had been copied on. It was this decision by the state that they would actually develop a pilot to determine if they could remove the contaminants enough to the point where they can actually discharge it to surface waters, which means they could discharge it to the river without sending it to us. So our position was, if you don't want to pay the fee associated with contaminated groundwater, then you can truck it somewhere else, or you can do whatever you have to do to pre-treat it and discharge it to the river. So they went through and did a pilot, and that was in October of 18. And really, we didn't really hear a lot from DEEP on that pilot study until this year. And so let's skip right down to June 9th, which we all remember. Tom was calling and Chris was calling at very late hours of the night about a release from the airport. And what basically happened was the airport, which is owned and run by a authority by the state of Connecticut, CAA, Connecticut Airport Authority, but they lease a number of properties to tenants. One of the tenants, fire foam system, discharged approximately 20,000 gallons. We really don't have any facts behind that except that the tank was 20,000 gallons. And we started seeing issues at manholes and at the plant, only to find out the end result was that this product that was released is basically made up of what they refer to as PFAS. And most of us probably never heard of PFAS before until June 9th. Lots of discussions, lots of pointing fingers. The MDC was asked by reporters, by the state, by DEEP, what did you do about it? Well, we can't control something that comes into the plant, right? It flows. There's no stopper. You can't just put a stopper in and stop something from flowing into the plant. So whatever came through, PFAS is a compound, a number of compounds. It's a polyfluoride type compound, and it's not regulated. It's not regulated by DEEP. So we have no way or processes to remove PFAS from the treatment process at the wastewater treatment plants. Here you can see on June 9th, June 11th, and 21st, these are parts per trillion. So 1.5, 90, and 330 parts per trillion is what was measured as being discharged to the river. This is, if we go back, now look at 10 to 18. This is important because when we were talking to the DEEP about the landfill and its discharge based on its permit, and the quantities that are getting discharged to the MDC's sewer, we didn't know anything about PFAS, okay? But the state did. So what we're showing you here is that this pilot project that occurred, we found out after this release and through a number of correspondence that when they did this test in October of 18, they actually tested for PFAS. We weren't aware of this. We were aware of this until whatever the dates are. Is there another slide, Nikki? So if you look at August 15th is when Diane Duva sent Chris Levesque the results of the pilot program that occurred in October of 18. And that's when we realized that there was PFAS tested. And the reason why we're asking the question is because DEEP was publicly talking about during this event that landfills was a #1 source of PFAS. And we said, oh my God, right? Well, what about our landfill? So I had Chris run a sample, and we actually did our own sample. And when we did the sample, we sent a letter to DEEP on 8/13 with these correspondence going back and forth. If you go back to the slide before, Nikki, here's the important point, that in October, they were doing the testing. They were aware of PFAS. We were not. The discharges prior to installing their treatment system, which is basically a bank of carbon filters, the levels were greater than 1,000 parts per trillion, which is basically 10 times the level that was being discharged to the Connecticut River on June 21st, 2019. After they installed the treatment systems, they dropped down to 22 parts per trillion. So why is this important to the MDC? I go to the next slides, Nikki. Oh, next one. So why is this important to the MDC? Well, I'm going to go one more slide. Okay. This is why it's important. It's called regulation. So the state develops a stakeholders meeting. U.S. Senate approves PFAS to be considered as part of the Clean Water Act. So why is this important to the 8-member towns of the MDC? Because regulation is going to force the MDC. Here we are arguing over the discharge to the sewer, and now we have something called PFAS, which we knew nothing about, and they're going to develop regulations that force they have a saying where certain things flow downhill. So what's going to happen is the POTWs, we call them, the publicly owned wastewater treatment facilities, are going to wind up having to deal with this PFAS. So that means our 8-member towns, whatever is decided in these meetings and in Congress, our 8 towns are going to have to pay for something that the state of Connecticut owns. And by the way, if we go back to those dates, Nikki, the first slide, first one, right there. So the pilot study was started in October 2nd. It was ended in the 4th, 3 days. They reduced the PFAS down to, below the drinking water standard, and then they stopped. So they took the system away. So my question is, why? We didn't know anything about PFAS, right? So we've got this, during the airport issue, I had everybody pointing to the MDC. I had the airport, I had DEEP saying, talk to the MDC. And yet, the state of Connecticut had a system that could remove PFAS down to the drinking water standard and removed it. Which means what? Which means our 8 towns are going to have to pay to remove it because it's being discharged to our plant? Or should 169 towns pay for it through DEEP? So this is a very important issue because it's going to be developed. It's going to come through regulation. And if we don't properly identify how much PFAS is coming from the landfill itself, then we're going to wind up paying for it as it comes to the plant through our pipe. So, Nikki, if you want to go, keep going.
8 towns.
8 towns. One more. So, go one more. Sorry, we're going to skip over that. So, in my discussions with DEEP, I had a staff and I had an attorneys general tell me, don't worry, the dam or the dike is going to protect the river from PFAS. So my position is, listen, I want to understand baseline, right? How much is actually leaching into the river so that we know it's coming from the landfill and not coming from a discharge at the plant? Because that's going to happen. We're going to be pointing fingers at each other. So this is a really basic, you guys have all, the gals have all seen the presentation from GEI on the dike system and the failure of the dike. This is just another one of those slides. But what it, and I'm gonna, yeah, Nikki, I'm gonna just use this because this is really important. I'm just gonna have a, thank you. So I was told that it's impossible for PFAS to be contaminating the landfill, to be contaminating the river because of the dike system. And the dike system in most areas, except for, as we talked about at the Founder's Bridge, has sheeting. So there's 75 feet of sheeting here. So the answer is, don't worry, the landfill can't contaminate the river. All of the PFAS is going to the treatment plant through the piping. Well, there's a little thing they call the tow drain. And the tow drain is on the land side, and we even have these at our drinking water reservoirs. And the whole important point of that tow drain, it's there for a reason, because this is an earth structure, and it's designed to allow water to penetrate the earth structure. And what happens is that it gets collected by the tow drain and then gets discharged, in this case, flows down to the North Meadows Pond, which is part of the flood control. And then when the flood control system fills up, the city pumps the water over the dike into the river. So if water can flow one way, is it impossible for water to flow the other way? So my position would be, we're looking into, again, trying to find baseline. If water can flow this way, then water can definitely flow that way. And if you have a circumstance where you have a heavy rain, the state has finally, I'm not sure they've agreed to this, but the landfill, we've referred to the landfill as it's contaminated groundwater, and the state has said, no, it's leachate. And what they mean by leachate is, it's a byproduct of what's in the landfill that leaches down, and they don't want it to hit the groundwater. But we know that's not true, because leachate, by their definition, increases with rain. So what I call rain that penetrates the ground, and eventually what's in the ground, we call it groundwater. And so because rain affects the leachate and or the groundwater volume, for example, we're ranging from 90,000 gallons a day to 50,000 gallons a day, we can agree that rain affects the leachate or the contaminated groundwater volume that's in this area. So if you have a heavy rainstorm, like we have had with 3 inches of rain, the river elevation is at 2 feet. You won't have water flowing this way. But look at the size, and this is not the scale, but in most cases, the dam structure is like 41 feet in Hartford and 36 feet in East Hartford. That's a problem, bud. It's a joke, but it's a problem. But look at the landfill. The landfill is significantly higher in elevation. And the point is, even look at this fact. This tow drain is encompassed by the mass of the landfill itself. So to tell me that that tow drain is not collecting leachate, contaminated groundwater at some point is impractical. And so therefore, either the flow of water to the river or through the ground system contamination or through the collection of the tow drain, discharging it to the North Meadows Pond, and then getting pumped over the dike is a real probability. There's another fact. After they closed the landfill, they installed a number of post-closure monitoring wells in the flats just outside on the water side of the dike system. Why? Why would you need a monitoring well on the if the dike is going to protect the river from any contaminants? Why would you need monitoring wells? So I was told that it's impossible. I don't believe it's impossible. We're going to work on this issue because it's really important for baselining what is actually occurring at the landfill. The fact that the carbon filters actually removed the PFAS down to a level that was drinkable and then removed only for the MDC to have to deal with it at the plant is not fair. It's not fair for our 8 member towns. And it's a topic that is going to be a heated one. There is discussion, and there's been lots of technical discussions about what we don't know about PFAS. What we do know is there's a probability from good sources at DEEP and consultants that 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit solves a number of issues. There's a lot of questions to go around regarding how much temperature it takes to remove PFAS. What does carbon filtration do? But the state has proven carbon filtration actually solves the problem. But incineration, which we have and we have redundancy in having, is a real viable solution that may be a solution for our state. We're not allowed, what they're finding is we've been talking about incineration for a while, just about sludge. But what they're realizing now is the towns and the states that have allowed land application of sludge rather than incineration, they're now saying, oops, now what? We've been land applying for years without any thought of PFAS. Now, what do we have on our hands? So I truly believe that incineration, although it's been shunned by EPA in the state in the past, I think it has a possible solution, and MDC could play a significant role in the regional issue here. And we are going to be talking with DEEP about that specific issue. One more slide, I think, Nick, or no? No? Okay, perfect. So that's a very important topic. User ad valorem group, that is something that we are working on. One thing that, besides the whether we get rid of ad valorem or not, is a very important topic. But one of those videos was really important because people don't even understand what ad valorem is, right? So we're going to educate the public, hopefully through the town councils and get in front of them to explain what Avalorm is. But we did have an important request from West Hartford, and we're going to be prepared to utilize this report to actually execute, which is the request to develop a cost of service study for Avalorm in our 8-member towns. And we are going to be utilizing this to develop that, and hopefully we can go around over the budget cycle and explain. One fair criticism was, MDC's rates increase, and it's very difficult to explain to the public what Avalorm is, why it increased. So our goal would be to be able to explain to towns what and why, what is Avalorm, and what does it cost to provide service to your town through Avalorm. It's a difficult discussion, but it's something that needs to be had, and it's an important thing to educate. Oh, yes.
While you discuss that, I would suggest in that presentation you should include that you are not only treating sewer where you infiltration.
Right.
Because the town which is bringing up this issue at the advice of some non-technical and technical people, they are not understanding that it will be impossible for anyone to really estimate. So don't, otherwise you will be giving wrong picture and you will make Hartford looking bad.
Yeah.
And us looking bad. So make sure that you amend that there is an infiltration taking place and each town has different rate of infiltration.
Okay, will do.
Chairman, Scott, I have two things on that. And thank you for the presentation on PFAS. And my comment on that really is, when the PFAS was discovered coming out of the Pequannock plant and traced it back to the airport, and there were some regulations in place that that were obviously violated at some point. Where the PFAS is not supposed to end up in the sewage treatment plant. But I'm gonna. This is just for the benefit of the other commissioners here. I've been asking this question for I don't remember how many years now, but so right away there was, I think, reasonably, concern about the water quality in Farmington River because the Pequannock plant discharges it's into the Farmington River. But Scott and I have talked about this for an awful long time. But there are 9 other sewage treatment plants on the Farmington River. None of them are ours. They're all upstream of Pequannock. Pequannock is the closest to the Connecticut River. I'm right about that.
Just to clarify, there's 5 on the Farmington, and then there's 4 others that contribute to the
tributaries to the Farmington, right? So there's 9 altogether. So basically, when the water leaves the West Branch or the East Branch or Barkhamsted, it's almost drinkable at that point, and it winds up being not healthy in a Kleinschmidt study, which I read I don't know how many times, but fish can't survive in the Farmington River. There are certain types of fish that can't survive in the Farmington River. And, but there's no clean water project for the 9 sewage treatment plants above ours, and they most likely are discharging PFAS there too. I don't know if they've managed to get upstream from our plant and testing for PFAS.
There has been no testing that has occurred.
So, and the relationship to the landfill, and this is another question that's that's related to not only PFAS but the other toxic materials that are coming out of the landfill that we're treating at this point is what's happening at other landfills. I mean, and we never seem to talk. I understood your joke about East Hartford, but we never talk about the Hockenham River here. So the Hockenham River has 2 sewage treatment plants above the East Hartford plant. East Hartford plant does not discharge into the Hockenham River anymore.
Right.
So we have Manchester and Vernon, or Rockville, and there are at least 2 other landfills on it. Most notably, Manchester is probably one of the biggest, and East Hartford's old landfill, which is closed for the most part now. I guess there's some solid waste going there, but and so was there any testing done from any of those? And I only bring this up because I think that everybody should understand this, as you said, as a problem for 169 towns, not for the 8 towns of member towns of the MDC. The cost of dealing with this is outside the reach. Now, I don't know how they deal with it in Manchester, but, you know, and I'm not trying to pick on Manchester, but they have revenue. When people bring stuff to their landfill, they're getting paid to put the, there's no revenue coming to the MDC from the Hartford landfill, you know.
Right.
So there's no way to offset the cost of, you know, treating this or diverting it or whatever happens with it. So, I mean, I just, you know, I think that going forward with DEP, you know, they have to have a statewide strategy, and they can't, the MDC can't, you know, handle this with the 8 member towns paying for this, because it's not really just our responsibility. And it's pretty obvious just here in central Connecticut, there are 2 rivers that contribute to the Connecticut River that could be dumping PFAS and other types of toxic chemicals or whatever into the Connecticut River that have nothing to do with the MDC. So that was my point on that. And then I think on the other issue, your second issue, which the commissioner commented on,
For the integrated plan, or for the, for the cost of service study for the Avalon.
yeah. So, you know, we held a number of meetings over the course of more than a year that I was at, and Alan Hoffman and I were both at with those meetings. It was a sewer user, I had ad valorem study, sewer user fee study, whatever we called it at the time. We weren't at the last one, and that's when we sort of got diverted to this West Hartford proposal and everything. But we also had a proposal in there, and I haven't seen that yet. So I want to be reassured that if I can work with John Myrtle, that we can get the results of that one in too, which had to do with sewer user fees and an ad valorem, to keep both of those things together and to derive some fees or revenue out of one to pay for certain operating costs and the other to pay for capital improvement costs. You know, I think that that's still worth looking at. We never really looked at it because every time we had a meeting, we got diverted into a different look at it. You know, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the towns and the MDC to deal with the issue, and the biggest part of the pressure is this capital improvements plan. I mean, you know, my water bill used to be $40 a quarter when I first came here to the MDC. So it's, you know, it's a lot more than that on a monthly basis now. I've been paying like, you know, easily $75, $80. Maybe I use too much water, but a month. And I said before earlier at the Board of Finance meeting, we went through years with the Water Bureau where the fee for water, or the rates that you pay, didn't change for years at a time, and actually lowered the rate one year. So, you know, that's not going to happen again, I don't think. Certainly not during my tenure here at the MDC, and probably not in my lifetime, and maybe not even yours, you know. So I think we still need to deal with that issue, that the burden that capital improvements plan puts on the water rates, and the fact that it keeps driving the consumption down. So the less water we sell, the more we have to charge for it. It's just a simple equation. It just, you know, there's it's an indirect proportion. I mean, the more you sell, the less it costs, you know. So anyway, I did just say that to support what you brought before us, and to, you know, to support the idea that this is a problem that goes well beyond the MDC. We can't be expected to pay for this with the 8 member towns. So thank you, Scott.
And just to add to that, Commissioner, we had, as it relates to the airport incident, at the insistence of the MDC, we were asking the state of Connecticut, DEEP, and the airport to answer some specific questions, because we had the press, we had everyone asking us, what did we do about it? We didn't know anything. We can't stop it from happening. So what we did know is that by code, every one of these facilities should have a spill prevention plan, which identifies if and when their fire alarm system activates their foam system, that they have a process to protect the drains within the hangar or within the area of the hangar to stop this PFAS from coming to the sewer treatment plant. And so DEEP did in fact send a letter to the airport and basically said that if any other further violations, there'll be a $25,000 violation. And I guess the point is that here we are arguing with the state over contaminated water, discharge of leachate, whatever the terminology is. And the feeling is they don't need to pay us for that. And now we find out that there's actually PFAS, which eventually our 8 towns are going to wind up having to pay for to remove at some point. But yet the state can send a violation to another agency to say, if you discharge PFAS to the river, you're going to be fined. It's just ironic, but it's what we've been dealing with from day one on the landfill in terms of groundwater discharge, contaminated groundwater discharge.
Rich?
I'm a little confused. The PFAS, is it being treated at our plants? Or
No.
is it being discharged so we're not
We can't
able
break
to
it down in our plant.
There's no regulation, Commissioner, to treat it, how to treat it, all the details. The question about incinerating, and I know that some people would say that 1,400 degrees isn't sufficient. I would tell you that talking with DEEP staff that they understand it's a strong possibility of utilizing the incineration process to remove it. But there's a lot of unknowns about the PFAS.
being discharged to the Connecticut River?
Yes.
Further questions, Commissioner?
The NEPOG and Barkhamsted reservoirs, were they tested for PFAS? By any chance?
Yeah, so NEPOG and Barkhamsted, their watersheds, there's no wastewater treatment plants that discharge to those water bodies.
It's water that comes out of the air. Further questions? Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman. Scott, does DEEP have any obligation to notify the public that it's moving into the rivers?
Well, it's a good question. I asked the question in an email to DEEP regarding that very question. Does the state DEEP have an obligation under whatever it might be, the Right to Know Act, whatever that might be? And we honestly, I got an answer back from the AG that said, we're not going to answer that question. So I don't know. But we did ask the question.
Further questions? Gary?
Just to follow up on the incineration question, what temperature do we currently burn? I should know this, but
1400.
So that is the temperature we're burning at.
1450.
And so you okay? That answers my question. Thank you,
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yeah, a couple questions, and if they can't be answered right here, I just want to at least raise it. Scott, you showed in that slide presentation an example of congressional action.
Yeah, Nikki, you want to put that back up?
And that congressional action was in fact taken, is that correct?
Yes.
And my question to that point immediately would be why our lobbyists in Washington had not advised us of that action.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. And this occurred, what you call that knee-jerk reaction to, this occurred like in days. I mean, literally, Congressman Larson actually went to the public hearing in Windsor about the airport. So we actually provided the congressman with information, so he was educated on the topic. But it happened very quickly. But we did, and we were made aware through our lobbyist, Steve Bonafonte, that this was happening.
Okay. Another question along these lines, and you spoke of the airport incident itself. Now, my understanding, and it could have been that I got the information from news reports, which we can talk about how we believe them or not, but the report indicated that either the EPA or the FAA was aware of this situation of the use of PFAS. However, there was no plan, apparently, no plan as to what to do if you had a leak, how you would deal with it. And so I think that I recall that this was an accident of either leakage or a spill that was not expected, not aware.
What I can tell you, Commissioner, is that what we experienced, which was pure chaos the night of this event, and no one had any facts or information for us. What I know professionally is that air hangers should have spill prevention plans, and those are mandated by code. And Commissioner Slemme and I built a big hangar down in Groton London Airport, and we knew exactly what those spill prevention plans entail. So it's very detailed. They're required to be on site. They're required to be inspected and trained on an annual basis. So whether or not that was occurring, I don't know. But what we received the night of June 9th of lack of information about what the product was, the cut sheet that we were given that night was actually the spec sheet on the foam that you buy at Home Depot to fill gaps, you know, the foam in a can. So that's what we received. And we had no knowledge of volume, no details on what was discharged, what is PFAS, all that good stuff. So, you know, I understand there's accidents, but my concern with this process is when the MDC is simply the receiver of this, we have no way to stop it coming in, and we get you know, bureaucracy basically pointing to the MDC and let the MDC deal with it. It's not fair. So we pushed back hard. We utilized Congressman Larson to help push back, and it wasn't received very well. But it was the right thing to do on behalf of the MDC.
Finally, if I can, Mr. Chairman, at this point, we now have two situations where we have complained to DEEP. We've already been talking about the landfill incident from a year ago. And no, I'm sorry.
More than a year ago.
Okay. And so we're still waiting for that to be resolved. And now we have incident number 2. And it just seems to me that given their attitude and the way they handle things, that these things are just going to continue and mount up and with no real resolution, and certainly not a resolution that our ratepayers are going to appreciate. So I throw those out. I don't expect a direct answer or a resolution right now, but thank you.
Also our taxpayers. John?
Scott, just really, I was at that Windsor meeting, and talking to some of the officials there, fire officials, they were under the impression that was a closed loop, and now you're saying that the closed loop in the airport is connected to our system.
Yes.
And there was, and I'm just curious because I was asked this. There was no way at the time of shutting off that part, that connection, turning it off, turning whatever, to stop it from getting to Pequannock, which wouldn't have affected anybody in Windsor from a standpoint of like shutting down the plant. Obviously, would be crazy.
So the only way that you physically can shut down the plant, if you want to call it that, is you're really diverting the flow to the river, right? So, or whatever your water course is. So there's no physical way of shutting a valve and saying, okay, you're going to back up everybody, every home, every business, every street.
I think it misunderstood. I'm saying at the connection where Bradley is.
Yeah, no,
which is not.
No, there's no physical way to shut that off. And the only option that you have is to divert it directly to the river through your weather system. But this was a foam
Yeah, I
which
understand.
it was very difficult to deal with. It was physically a problem. Forget about chemically. It wasn't like it was. It's like bubbles bath. Exactly. Trying to if you drain your tub and you got this foam in it, how difficult it is to get it to go through the drain. That's what was happening at the treatment plant. It couldn't get processed because it was just foaming. So.
And the other part, I know the media tried to blame us and go at us with a vengeance, obviously. But I can say at the meeting, I don't know if anybody else from here was there, but Deep was very positive, talking about the MDC.
Yeah.
And how there wasn't a thing they could do, because it was brought up a couple of times, and they basically said if they had shut off, if they could have turned a handle on the plant, it would have backed up, it would have been a worse disaster. So they were very positive when it came to.
And I would only suggest to you, and that's great, but it didn't happen by accident, right? It happened because we brought in Congressman Larson. We gave him a copy of our questions to Deep and to CAA, and also the local representatives. So they understood. Everyone in the room understood that we're not just going to sit and take this. And so that's the reason why we got the reaction. But the weeks before, we're dealing with the state of Connecticut, both sides pointing to the MDC.
Right.
And last week, Scott, we had a subcommittee meeting. You said it was almost impossible to get another incinerator.
Right.
And we're maxed out right now to running two of them. We're
Right.
making our $6 million a year revenue. Are you saying now that the state might entertain us, allowing us to build another one if it could be found that burning this problem could
What I'm suggesting is that we're going to have discussions with Deep over this topic, and without getting into the details, it's a growing issue across the country, and we've got to have it. We got to have a solution. My goal is to not have 8 towns pay for this. It should be a statewide problem that's being, if the filters can solve this problem at the landfill, why is our 8 towns paying for it? So that's the discussion we want to have. And if it includes incineration, then so be it.
Further questions? Commissioner
Chairman.
Don?
Are we CCing riverfront recapture on everything?
I knew that was going to come up.
What was the question?
Are we CCing riverfront recapture on everything?
As it relates to PFAS in this issue, I cannot say we are specifically, but I don't know if you've had any discussions with them at the board meetings about the discharge.
I do not sit on their board.
No, but it's Lemmy, I'm sorry.
they were certainly aware of it.
Yeah.
Worked with riverfront recapture on
other issues, but I did ask that Mike Zaleski and John Myrtle that we could share each other's like links to each other's websites so that there's constant communication between the district and that all the board meetings from Riverfront, any votes or anything important gets sent to us, and it's supposed to be sent to our district clerk, and then vice versa. Anything that we do that could affect Riverfront recapture, or they could decide it might affect them, get sent to them too. I don't know that we haven't had the definitive answers on PFAS to tell anybody about it.
Give anybody
So,
any
I'm not
information.
sure they're aware of what we did on it, but I'm not sure that that's a definitive answer for anybody. So.
Well, I asked that question simply because they're looking to develop some property in the north end, and they're the stewards of our waterways.
Sure.
And I really would encourage MDC to inform them on Deep's position and what's happened from 15 on to present.
Sure.
So that they're made aware of it.
I would tell you this, I have
issues, we don't know what their position is on it, so.
Well, or lack of.
But we did.
But I did have.
Sure, Commissioner Curry, we did talk about it with respect to the Russo property. We did talk about the landfill leachate and the possibility that PFAS is there. They just drilled a well and got.
That's been
because
before us.
we can no longer serve, there's one other property that's landlocked over there that we're not gonna be able to serve anymore. Right now, it's served through the Russo's property to them, and we're not gonna be able to do that anymore. And I was told that the well, as far as I know, that the well's on, and we are, you know, and that, so DPH must have accepted the water quality.
I don't know about that. I would tell you, I have had direct conversations on the PFAS issue with the town manager, Peter Sousa. I have no idea if Peter has talked to Riverfront, but I know they're in direct communication because of the Russo property. So, but I can't say whether or not they had a conversation.
Rich?
This is a question for Bart. Now that we know the point of origin in the product, do we have any legal liability? Because we're discharging into Connecticut River.
Yeah, yes, and I'd prefer to go into it in my report as we get to that next.
When we get to his report. Are there any further questions of the Chief Executive Officer's report? Okay. Item number 8, report from the district council.
Okay, so the answer to that question is, if you look at the handout I gave you on page 20, we already have an action pending against DEEP related to the landfill. And we have amended the complaint to seek a declaratory judgment that we do not have to accept, that we can refuse to accept their landfill discharges because of the PFAS. This is a long topic to go into, but
we got plenty of time.
It's a very serious matter because of the daily discharge that's going on and the extent of the discharge. If you look at what our measurements were, our measurements were taken right below the landfill at the point it goes into our sewer. And we were at over 3,500 parts per trillion. The safe drinking water level is 70 parts per trillion. And the discharge that started all this in Pequannock is 1/10 of that discharge, and that happened one time. Okay, this is something that's coming out of the landfill, going directly into our sewer. And you'll remember that when we were first debating this with the Commissioner Klee, he asserted that this was the most environmentally sound way to get rid of the discharges at the landfill. Well, at that time, they had to have known of the PFAS problem, and they were frankly misrepresenting to us what was going into our sewer system. Not that it damages the sewer system, but there's no way for us to get it out of the water that we're discharging into the Connecticut River, which leads to another problem. As a discharger into the Connecticut River through our sewer system, we're violating the Clean Water Act also. And even if DEEP, as the source of it, doesn't want to bring an action against us, that doesn't mean that a private attorney general can't bring an action against us. So that is the reason we thought it's serious enough right immediately to amend our complaint that we already have pending in the Superior Court and raise this PFAS issue. It's a constant discharge. It's a constant discharge that could be mitigated, although who knows what the cost is, but it could be mitigated at the source rather than at our plant. Because think of the difficulty of trying to have a charcoal filter for all water and sewage going through the plant. The technical problems of that would be overwhelming. Whereas they had it at the landfill, they discovered that it was actually removing this material from the PFAS was being removed by the systems that they had, and then they just stopped the systems and have made no effort to do anything since then on the PFAS. And the responses we got back in the newspaper article, it was, they recall PFAS a forever chemical because it goes into the protein in your body or into fish, and never leaves. And it bioaccumulates through your lifetime. DEEP has told people not to eat the fish that is caught in the river, subject to the PFAS. And PFAS, the studies have linked PFAS to high cholesterol, reproductive systems, immune system issues, decreases in childhood growth and development, and some research indicates chemicals are associated with kidney and testicular cancer. So it is obviously a very serious matter, and it's a discharge, ironically, being done by the Department of Environmental Protection, which tells you the problem when somebody is both the permitter and the permittee. So we are doing what we can in court to do it. Frankly, I don't think in the discussions that the chairman and I and the CEO had with DEEP about the chemicals that were being discharged into our sewer system, they were particularly open and honest with us about what was actually happening. And it was only this problem up in Windsor that led to a conclusion that, there's an issue, and the person managing the landfill, Mr. Fregon, was the one who first said, the PFAS are really a byproduct of landfills. That's your most serious issue. And we went, what? And then tested and found these extraordinary levels of PFAS. So it's a bad situation. It reinforces our belief that the proper way to dispose of the leachate, which is obviously contaminated from the landfill, the best system is certainly not to just dump it into our sewer and have it go into the Connecticut River. I mean, that's probably the worst thing that you can do with it, because the only times that it's not going into the Connecticut River is when the sewer backs up and it goes into some property in Hartford, okay, which is not exactly ideal either.
It's not the best sewer in our system.
No, it's probably the worst.
Right.
So,
Well, is there a question, Rich,
Yeah, I have a
relative to this?
Can our member towns join in this suit, and would you encourage that?
I would. Yes, they could join.
Bart, this is the injunctive action that
Yes.
we are amending,
Right.
Yes.
and they brought an action to
In
dismiss
fact, I will
this.
send it to all the corporation councils tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
So that's the bad news on PFAS. I do have a little bit of good news. Oh, go ahead.
Just one more question. I just want to get this straight for the record. So, DEEP at the landfill had
Information.
filter system there on a temporary basis, and it was taking all the PFAS out of the discharge for a period of time, and then they removed that filter system.
Well, we don't know if it was removing all of it.
Not all, but it was certainly below, levels where you could drink it.
22 parts per million, trillion. So it went from greater than, we had 35,100, and the state had said it was 1,000 or greater than 1,000. But their report shows that their filters actually reduced it down to below the drinking water standard. And then DEEP staff was quoted in the paper saying that they were aware of the PFAS in late 18. So that corresponds to
Yes.
That
dates,
time period
the
that-
time frame of the pilot study.
And they haven't given a reason why they won't put that filter system back on there in the meantime to keep that PFAS out of the river?
No, they have not.
Further questions, Commissioner?
Yes, we're focusing on the PFAS here, but the whole reason that we were going to turn the valve off last summer was for all the other stuff. Did the charcoal filter take care of that? The ammonia and the other stuff.
I would need the technical people. to
Yeah,
answer that.
so the answer is, they have a permit that they issued themselves, and the permit identifies unlimited discharge of the certain components in their permit. So the answer is, there is no requirement to get down below a certain amount, because their permit says it's unlimited. So
But
ammonia, for
while it
example.
might not be a violation, it's a 500-page study, and I will go through it with the technical people and have answers to you on those questions. As to everything else, I can't answer that sitting here today.
I'm sorry.
We got other, I'll call on you. Who has spoken? Ray?
You know, you're talking the Hartford landfill, but you also have a landfill in Rocky Hill.
Sorry, Commissioner, is your mic on?
Your mic on?
We have a landfill in Rocky Hill that was in operation for over 20 years, the Caruso landfill, that's 500 feet away from the Connecticut River. It's approximately 45 acres, so I'm sure if it has to do with landfills, that landfill's been closed, 20 years now? You know, it's polluting the river there too, so there's a number of landfills, like you said, Bud,
That have been closed.
they just don't care. Because if they cared, they'd be doing something about this. And it's been going on for years.
Bill, Commissioner?
Just a question. It looks like this complaint is dated September 4th, return date October 1st. Can you give us some kind of timeline on what you would anticipate the
court to
Yeah, they have a motion to dismiss that is pending right now, which should be heard within the next few weeks. Their motion to dismiss is based on their claim that we're seeking money damages. Our response is no, we're seeking an injunction. We're not seeking money damages in a declaratory action. So that should be heard within the next couple of weeks. Then we have asked for the court will set a scheduling order after that is decided. And so it will occur over a period of months. It will not be immediate resolution.
Further questions? Go ahead, Bart.
Okay, so moving on from the good news on PFAS, I will tell you the general liability. You remember that after we had the disaster in the reservoir where the person ran into into our barrier and then sued us and was successful, after that point, we entered our appearance from district council into every pending general liability case and started tracking them very diligently. And I'm pleased to tell you that we have reduced the number of general liability cases from 35 at the time when we started this process down to 3 today. And that's really through the good work of John Myrtle, who has been our eyes and ears tracking these things. You have approved a number of settlements, but we've also won a substantial number of dismissals. We've won a case at the Supreme Court, and our general liability exposure has decreased tremendously through the good work of John Myrtle. Next, I should tell you the class action case involving the non-member surcharge in Glastonbury and the other non-member towns. The judge has granted class certification. The time period of the class is from 2012 to 2014. If all of the surcharges were returned in total, that amount would be a little more than $7 million. Now, we still have the liability to try. We still have the damages to try. There's a long way before anything occurs here. But the class certification is a significant step because it removes it from a claim that's worth a couple $100 to a claim that can be worth $7 million. We have asked the Supreme Court to review the granting of the class certification at this time. Normally, those types of appeals would be considered after the case is over, not during the case itself. But because of the nature of this case and the unusual fact that we've never seen a claim in which it's an implied contract be certified as a class. And there are a lot of technical reasons for that. We've asked the Supreme Court to hear and decide whether the granting of the class was correct at this time. We are awaiting a decision on that. We should have a decision within a few weeks. It is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who decides whether or not that would occur. If that is denied, we still have the appeal of that, but it is at the end of the case. We would then have class notice go out. Discovery is complete. There will be motions for summary judgment on both sides. You can expect that probably if we are not able to appeal, sometime by the end of the year for the motions on summary judgment, and then a trial would happen sometime next year. I'm bringing this to your attention because the number 7 million is large, and it also, remember how you used the 7 million back then. It was used to decrease the general water rate. Okay, so the 6,500 people who are members of this class also benefited from the water rate decreasing. So the 7 million would have to decrease by some amount, but they would also be seeking interest on that from the period of 2012 to today. It's a complicated matter, but it's something I'm bringing to your attention because it's something that you have to consider as you're doing a budget. And it certainly goes to the discussions that you've previously had about what is the proper amount of funding to have set aside. Because if everything goes wrong, you lose the case, you lose the interest, we've knocked out any claim for attorney's fees. But if that should occur, those things are payable. Okay, I mean, they don't want to hear that you'll pay it over time. It's payable then. So you'd have to find some way to pay it. And I would think that the prudent thing to do would be to start preparing for a rainy day here and put monies aside over a period of time. But that's a decision for the finance and for this board to consider.
Just one quick question.
Bud.
On that. You said 6,500, that's just Glastonbury.
Yes,
So if the class action suit picks up all 4 non-member towns, it's more like 9,000 or a little over.
Right, but the 7 million number is still right. Any other questions on that one? Okay, seeing none. I'd like to share with you another problem which has to do with your sludge burning. The EPA, Environmental Protection Authority, has a rulemaking process in which they can set forth standards by which emissions are controlled. And during the last administration, they passed a rule which increased the level of scrutiny on sludge burning plants and changed the level of carbon monoxide which can be emitted from these plants rather dramatically. Those rules were attacked by NACWA, an organization that we belong to, and the way that the rules were adopted was found to be incorrect, but the court left the rule in place as it left the ability of the EPA to insist on different standards in place while they adopted formally and properly the rule. The EPA in Boston has seen fit to examine our plant, and the new standards kick into effect if you have spent more than 50% of the cost of the plant in upgrading the plant. Okay, it's kind of ironic that you're punished for improving your plant. We have had an enormous battle now for a year and a half over what constitutes upgrades and what constitutes maintenance. But in any case, we are moving up, even under the best of scenarios, we're in the 40% range of cost of improvements to cost of plant. And it will be difficult to stay under the 50% forever. So what you're looking at here is a situation in which the necessary improvements might have to be made in order to keep the sludge burning going. You don't really have much choice as to whether or not to abandon the sludge burning, which is always tempting under these circumstances. The problem with that is the ERA funding that we have received has clawback provisions in it. And so you remember we got a substantial amount of federal money to improve those plants, which of course is what's kicked us into our current problem. But just rather than listen to my technical explanation of how the plants work, I know that not everybody's familiar with them. I've asked Tom Tyler to attend today and just give you a very brief overview of what our situation is with the plant. And Chris Levesque is here too.
What would be the cost to get it where they want it?
Well, that's a good
Not a
question.
problem.
The question is, we initially, we've done some work. We've been discussing this issue with EPA for more than 3 years now. And so we have a range of 5 million. And we have seen other utilities with new facilities that were built recently that have spent more than 30 million to comply. So
That's 5 per incinerator.
yeah, so our the challenge that we have is if it's 5 million, but that 5 million we can't get to those levels, then how much more? But let's have Tom give the explanation of the incinerator.
Thanks, Scott. Well, Scott earlier in the meeting tonight gave a pretty good setup when he mentioned about things that flow downhill. So we're going to give you a real high overview of what happens when everything flows downhill to the Hartford treatment plant. So handling the solids at a wastewater treatment plant can be pretty difficult. As you can imagine, the water is, clean water is provided. It's used in a variety of ways, and all that dirty water flows to the wastewater treatment plant. And our goal is to remove the solids from the wastewater so that the water meets our permit and we can return it safely into the environment. It's a critical public safety and health mission. It's part of the district's core business. So there are many steps along the way in the solids treatment. We use a variety of methods, physical, chemical, and biological means to treat the solids. It all flows into the front of the plant. You see the boxes called primary sludge. We utilize a physical settling process. We remove sludge from the bottom. Also talked earlier today about the FOG program, fats, oils, and grease. They float, so we physically remove them. We thicken them, so we're always trying to reduce the amount of water, separate the water and the solids. We also, at the Hartford plant, we're permitted to be a regional solids receiving facility. So we take in solids from other treatment plants that don't have incineration or other means to treat their solids. We also take in septage from certain member town homes that have septage, and also non-member towns. So if you happen to have a house that isn't connected physically to a wastewater treatment plant, you have a septic tank, you have a little wastewater treatment plant in the back of your house, and those solids have to go somewhere as well. They have to go to a permitted wastewater treatment facility, so we take in septage from others. We also take in industrial waste from a variety of different businesses. So we put all those solids together and we try and thicken them up because, again, we're trying to remove water and get a very concentrated blend of solids. We dewater those in a centrifuge, pretty much like a washing machine that spins and dries your clothes out. Only ours spins in a horizontal means, not a vertical means. So we're, again, separating water and solids. We take those solids, we put them into the incinerator. We have 3 incinerators. We can operate any 2 at a time by permit. And several years ago, as Scott mentioned, we included a heat recovery process where we generate up to 40% of the plant's power needs from the heat that comes off the incinerators. So this is a picture of our solids receiving facility. We've taken the variety of the products that I mentioned before, other treatment plants, septage, and occasional water treatment plants also produce a residual that has to be treated somewhere, and we have the ability to receive those as well. So the solids processing, I mentioned the thickening and the dewatering, and the lower right picture is the incineration facility. So the incinerator, there's two fundamental types. There's multi-hearts. That's what the district has. There's a picture of it on the right in the screen, and it's many levels. There are brick hearths. There's a rotating assembly in the middle. That's the item you see in green, and it moves the solids in an in and out manner as it rotates and goes from hearth to hearth. So in the middle, the sludge gets very dry. It starts to combust, and then in the end, it just becomes inert ash. The heat comes off, and that's what we go to make electricity with. Then the ash also comes out of the bottom, and that gets conveyed into a storage facility that is then later removed for final disposal. So I mentioned the heat recovery. We take that hot air, comes off at about 1450 degrees into some boilers. We generate steam. The steam goes to a turbine. This is a very old and proven technology that we've run very successfully for the last 2 years. Generate about $1 million worth of electricity a year, direct ad valorem savings, and powers about 40% of the plant. The air leaves the boilers and it goes into scrubbers. This is really where we do our pollution control. This is part of what Scott had just mentioned, that we may be facing significant upgrades in this area to help reduce the amount of pollutants that are released into the atmosphere. Our air goes through a wet scrubber and then out into the stack. So that's a very, very quick high level. I would also encourage, we go on the sites of the very beautiful water facilities. I know that some of the commissioners have come down to the wastewater treatment plant, and of course we're always open for that if you wanted to have more information or have a site tour.
So the reason we're bringing this up is that we had been working with EPA trying to avoid a consent order from them. They have a notice of violation pending, and there are two ways that we can proceed in the future. Either we can reach agreement with them and establish some kind of a schedule for making the necessary improvements, or we can fight this out in court, which will take a considerable period of time to do. Now, it's not that there are no defenses in court. I mean, these are regulations which have been rejected at the district court level, and they're moving on them as if they're fully adopted. We have asked our lobbyists in Washington to approach the EPA and try to reason with them and say, wait a second, although we're obviously in favor of clean air, we're doing everything that we can here. Ours is a really state-of-the-art facility for right now, but these new regulations are going to make it very difficult. You have to somehow get rid of the sludge anyway, okay? So there is an enormous cost that Scott and I were discussing before. What was it, Scott? About $6 million a year if you can't operate the plant?
So we receive from Tom's slide, we receive, we talked about this as the BPW meeting last week. We receive about $6 million in revenue from outside sludge that's trucked to us or from outside the district. But the challenge that we have is we're about 40%. There's about 5 incinerators in the state of Connecticut. We're one of them. We're the only one that has redundancy. So when a facility goes down for maintenance or whatever reason, they rely on us. But we represent 40% of the market. So if we had to ship our sludge somewhere else, you're talking 20 million and more a year, and losing the $6 million in revenue on the other side. So it would be a tremendous impact to us and the region if these incinerators weren't operating.
So that's what I have on that. There can be budgetary impacts from that also, particularly in relationship to capital outlays. We will keep you advised of all developments,
Any questions,
okay? And
Gary?
Scrubbers, do they work through, you said they were a wet scrubber,
Wet scrubbers.
Tom? And does that work by, like, neutral, is it like, one is an acid, one is a base, and neutralizes it or something? How does that work?
Yeah, the water within the scrubber cleans the air in essence.
Tom, can you answer that Tom, can you answer that question?
with the mic, Tom.
Mike, please.
Sure. The water in the scrubber, in essence, acts like a filter for a lot of the particulates and different items. There are some pollution controls that happen within the body of the incinerator based upon a temperature level that we have to maintain, certain oxides and different things like that. So some pollution controls happens in the temperature range of the incinerator and some happens in the scrubber, and it's almost like a washing of the air.
Can I follow up on that? Tom, so how does that get the carbon monoxide out?
Well, the carbon monoxide is not controlled through the scrubber.
Oh.
That would be an item inside the temperature of the incinerator.
So it has to burn more cleanly,
Correct.
and then we're
Typically,
producing more carbon dioxide, which the federal government wants us to do.
typical carbon monoxide is reduced by higher temperatures in an
Right, burns
afterburner,
it.
which we do not have.
The
Contribute
challenge that we have-
contribute to global warming.
The challenge that we have with this SSI regulation is we are one of very few. So we deal with this issue at a NACWA level, as Bart mentioned, and NACWA's been supporting all of us in this fight against the SSI rule. But the challenge that we have is unique because we're one of the very few that are existing that have renovated their incinerators to the point where we're meeting that 50% mark, and therefore they're considering us new. So most of the problems or the issues across the country are they're new facilities and they have to comply with the new regulations, and they're not. There's some outlying issues, but we don't have a lot of people behind us that are saying, hey, yeah, us too, we're in support of this. So it's the challenge is that we've got about a $5 million per incinerator. We've got 3 incinerators. So it's really a matter of a capital investment and moving forward.
So,
And it's going to affect the cost of sludge disposal, which will be, not just us, it's everybody we serve is 40% of that market.
so the last thing I have to say, on the long-term control plan, there are legal consequences if your long-term control plan is rejected. You have to file a new one within 60 days, or you have to get an amendment through the commissioner. Because of the type of letter we got from DEEP, we don't consider that to be a formal rejection of our plan, but a request for additional information. Because first of all, you do not have to have in your long-term control plan an affordability study. That was one of their criticisms, okay? Was the affordability study wasn't in one part of the plan. It doesn't need to be, okay, to be in compliance with the long-term control plan. The issue, though, as Scott has brought out, is as we do the studies of our sewer system, you find more and more problems. And if the sewers themselves don't work to transmit the material to the tunnel, the whole system doesn't work. So as you do the CMOM, you find it costs more and more and more, and you have to consider the entire cost of this as you're looking at how do we realistically fix this problem. So as we've done it, it's turned, as you might guess, into more, it's like fixing over your house. It's always harder than you thought it was going to be. And so the sewer problem in Hartford, West Hartford, and the other towns is a complex problem, and it's going to take time. I mean, that's the realistic, and I think everybody wants the best solution here. So we will be going back to them over the month. We will be seeking clarification of their comments, and then we will report back to you. Thank you.
Rich?
Does the clock start since you received that letter? Or?
No, because it doesn't comply. It's not a rejection letter. It's a request for more information
How
letter.
much time do we have left?
There is no time limit because we've submitted the plan, and that was what we had to do by a date certain.
One more question on another item. 777 Main Street
Yep.
status?
Yes, the Supreme Court just accepted the appeal today.
Thank you.
And we did, in our response to DEEP, we did identify the fact that we answered the specific question that we were in compliance. That was the most important piece. We were in compliance with the submission of the format of the consent order, but we did identify the fact that we needed to update the board tonight, and staff is working on the technical responses to their other questions.
Any further questions? Okay. Item 9. Board of Finance consideration and potential actions regarding fund balance policy. Is there a motion on?
So moved,
A?
Mr. Chairman.
Second.
What's it?
We have Adam Cray here, if you'd like. Adam Cray for Hilltops here.
Okay, Bud?
This was passed at the Board of Finance this evening, accepted the resolution as originally proposed.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Move and seconded. Discussion? Commissioner?
I know the hour is late, but I'd be remiss if I didn't at least try to do this again. I'd like to preface my remarks by just saying that I've treasured for the town of East Hartford for 12 years, chairman of the Board of Ed for 6, town council, vice chair 2. But the point I'm
Could you
trying to
speak
drive,
into the microphone, Commissioner?
Oh, I'm sorry. The point I'm trying to drive through is I'm not just going to throw numbers out. It is on.
Do you have it on?
It is on.
Pull it close.
Pull it closer.
That's good.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me now? Okay. The point is, I just don't want you to think I'm throwing numbers out there and hoping that they stick. What I'm going to propose, I believe, has some merit. Actually, I believe it has a lot of merit. But I do have some questions first. Number 2 of the proposed policy, and I'm all for a policy. I think it's very important. But number 2, any expenditure of all or part of the available general fund balance. Could someone tell me what available means?
Adam?
Yes, definitely. That's a good question. So your fund balance, if you were to look in your audited financials, your fund balance is actually made up of a number of different subcategories. And I have the exact ones for the MDC. There's basically, there's 4 pieces to a fund balance, and you only have funding in 2 of them. You have some non-spendable, which are basically, they're permanently precluded from becoming cash again. They're already committed. And your second piece is the unassigned. So available means simply what's available to be spent. It's not already committed to something else. So it's what's free and clear for you to spend.
So
and I apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. I just want to say I apologize. I didn't state. I'm Adam Cray. I'm a director with Hilltop Securities. I'm sorry.
Okay. So when you tell us that our fund balance is at a level of 33%, that's not available funding.
That is the available, yes. We
That is
scraped
the
out
available.
there's only a couple $1 million that's not available, and we scraped that out. Yes.
All right. So then I think, take the easiest one first. My concern is, as I expressed at the Finance Committee, we've got this section about Chapter 3, and anyone who goes online, whether it be a commissioner in the future or a member town customer, they're not going to know what this means unless they then go to the charter, if they can find it, So why don't we just simply say any expenditure of all or part of the available fund balance authorized by a vote of the district board? And throw out all that other language where you have to look something else up. So that's my first motion to amend. So we changed the language to number 2 just to say any expenditure of all or part of the available general fund balance must be authorized by a vote of the district board. And I'm assuming that's what chapter 3 somewhere in there says, but I'll be darned if I could actually find it.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, but didn't we, you already agreed to this?
Yeah, this
I did,
amendment.
but it went
I'll
down.
agree to that one.
What, excuse, in the committee, this was an amendment that was made and accepted, not by vote, it was basically accepted within the committee. Subsequently, Don amended a second amendment, which failed a seconding in the committee, which basically killed the issue.
It did because it was handled as one vote.
One at a time.
And then there was a vote, and the vote was 3-3, and it failed.
So the amendment on the first one's been seconded.
So I'm moving that we amend number 2.
You want to move to an amendment, or do you have another amendment?
Well, you're telling, well,
why don't we dispose
the
of
motion on the floor was as written, is my understanding, and that's not the
But
case.
you've made a motion to amend. Let's take up that amendment first and dispose of it.
Right,
That's the only point the chair's making.
right, okay.
Is there discussion? Is there any discussion on this issue? If not, all those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Objection? No objections, okay. Is there
Okay.
a second amendment?
Second amendment is number 4. Since we just took action on number 2, that says the district board has the authority to approve spending any of the available fund balance, I think number 4 is really moot and it's no longer needed. And again, it just muddies the water. With mentioning.
Motion is to delete item 4.
Motion is delete number 3 because, or number 4, because all it says is, in any given fiscal year, it exceeds the target set forth of one above, the board can vote to spend the dollars. Well, we just said that in number 2. So I think number 4 is unnecessary.
I just would like to clarify the request for a policy. So Adam's here.
It's not pertinent to the amendment.
Okay.
No, we've got an amendment being proposed to delete. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Okay. Go ahead, Rich.
Just a question, Don, where it states given physical year, that's not recited in paragraph 2.
Where are you reading? I'm sorry.
4, where it says, if available general fund balance realized in any given fiscal year exceeds. It doesn't recite that in number 2. It doesn't talk about timeline. It states any expenditure part available general fund.
Rich, you've got to use your microphone.
Well,
it's very difficult to hear you. Get as close as you can.
4 deals with a timeline of given fiscal year, balance in that particular year. 2 doesn't talk about a timeline. Could it be last year's fund balance, this year's fund balance?
Let me do this. Adam, could you still?
Can I just
could you
answer the question, Bill?
Yeah, I'd like to get who wrote the amendment to, or suggested the amendment, and then whether it's, Adam, you did, is Stoney here?
Yeah, he's here.
You modified it, didn't you, Stone? Commission?
Address it?
No.
Okay.
Let's find out what the intent of it is, rather than.
Yes, substantively, the language in section 2 and the language in section 4 are the same as what was proposed initially before the Board of Finance last week, with 2 exceptions. One is we took away the supermajority vote, and 2, we reference Chapter 3 of the Charter. Chapter 3 of the Charter is that part of the Charter that goes into this board's budget-making authority, its authority to spend monies, appropriate monies, above and beyond what is budgeted in any particular year. That's why that chapter was mentioned. Again, that's been taken out of Section 2 now with the passage of that last amendment. I would suggest that it's, that being said, the reference to Chapter 3 in Section 4 could also be taken out, so that they'll be consistent. The substantively, as to Section 2, that speaks to any excess monies or any expenditures from the actual available balance. So it's any expenditures from that 30 to 35% that's referenced in Section 1. Section 4 deals with monies that exceed the amount of available funds or exceed the 35% in the expenditure of money. So they are somewhat subtle, but they are different. They don't say the same thing.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would state that number 2,
I'll let you.
it indicates now that we've just approved that verbiage change so that the board can spend fund balance anytime by a
It's
vote.
their discretion, right?
Right. Number 4, it states, it leads to what Chris just said about exceeding the target set forth, which is actually 35%. It would have to exceed 35%. But it doesn't matter whether it's 36, 40, 20, 10, 2. Number 2 still says the board can spend the fund balance by a vote. So it doesn't matter whether it's the first 10% or the last 20% over the 50%. It can spend any and all of those dollars is what number 2
They
says.
can do whatever they want.
Not that I'm ever suggesting we do that. So number 4 is redundant, and it just muddies the water, I think. But that's just my thought.
There's no part of authorship here. I think they say two different things, but
okay.
I think.
Thank you. I would just like to clarify. So I requested a fund balance policy, which Adam generated. The purpose for the fund balance policy was to do one very specific thing. Obviously, there's details that have to go into the resolution. But the reason was to protect the fund balance that we have at 33% or some number that we could justify between 30 and 35. The problem that the towns have and some of the commissioners have with the way the details have been drafted within the resolution is that the towns are fearful that if we drop below 30%, for some reason, because the board says you need to spend money on X, Y, Z, that we're going to then the following year charge the towns some number to get back to 30. That wasn't ever the intent of this policy. The policy was to allow and justify the towns why we felt it was important to be between 30 and 35. But if there's a reason for whatever that is, it's an emergency, it's a one-time expense, whatever the board decides as part of the budget, the intent was never to really bear that decision on the backs of the towns to get us back to 30, right? So, Adam, if you could answer that question, how do you draft this policy to take that into consideration? Because Peter Privatera has been here, the town manager's been here, other commissioners. That could be in 1 year or in 3 years a significant dollar amount increase to the town's budget to get us into our target range. The policy was meant to protect the money that was there, not to force the towns to pay a certain amount to get us to that number. If that makes any sense, Adam?
And do you want to address that, Adam? The original intent was drafted
Certainly.
by Adam. It was
Yes,
changed.
certainly, Mr. Chairman. And being a numbers guy, not a word guy, of course, the original draft was worse. And this is trying to make it clear, thanks to Mr. Stone. So the original, as Mr. Jellison said, there are, using the Government Finance Officers Association's best practices, and it's available on their website, there are 4 parts to a fund balance policy. You establish the range that's appropriate for your particular organization, or you establish a number. They don't say range. It could be 3 months of operating expenditures is, you know, what you want, or 15% of your overall budget, or a range. People do it different ways, but you establish the amount you should have. The second piece is, if it rains and you need to spend it, how are you going to spend it? That's the intent of number 2, as Mr. Stone said. If you need to spend it because you have an emergency, how are you going to spend it? Vote of the board. Number 3 is if it rains and you have to spend and you drop below your target. So your target's, the proposed target is 30 to 35%. If you drop below 30%, the intent of number 3 is the chief financial officer of the district has to come before the board for the board to agree to a plan to replenish the fund balance. And the proposal here is that should be done within 3 years. Your plan, if you will, to get back up to at least 30% can be over 3 years. Because no one expects you to be able to fix a problem in 1 year. That isn't really realistic. And then the intent of number 4 is if you're in excess of your target. So if your target's 30 to 35%, if your fund balance goes up, you have 4 years in a row, you have 3 years in a row of surpluses, and your fund balance just naturally increases because revenues are over expenditures. If your fund balance naturally increases and starts getting too high, how do you get it back to the reasonable category so you're not just sitting on funds that aren't working for the district? How you get rid of those, how you appropriately spend them. Right, exactly. So that was the original intent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just change my amendment then to, I respect Attorney Stone's opinion, just to eliminate the Chapter 1 verbiage.
Okay, so you're withdrawing the amendment, the second amendment.
Well, I still think it's redundant. I will.
The withdrawal of the amendment, is there objection to it? Okay, no objection. There's a seconder, that's why I'm asking, was there an objection? So we withdrew the second amendment that deals with Section 4. Is there further discussion?
I still want to take out the Chapter 1 verbiage in Section 4.
Chapter 3.
I mean, Chapter 3.
Chapter 3?
Chapter 3 and 4, right?
No, just 4.
So remove. It says pursuant to Chapter 3. That's what you
Remove
want to take.
Chapter 3 of the compiled charter of the district to replace it with pursuant to, by vote of the district board.
Yeah.
The same language from paragraph 2.
That makes it.
That's the second amendment? Okay. Please read it.
So
before you, there's an amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, read the amendment.
Paragraph 4, as amended, will read, if the available general fund balance realized in any given fiscal year exceeds the target set forth in Section 1 above, the district board may authorize, by vote, the expenditure of any excess available funds as it deems appropriate.
But they have the right to do that at any time,
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Commissioner? Okay. I'm sorry.
Not on the amendment, but on the resolution.
Let's stay on the amendment so we're consistent here. Let's be further discussion on the amendment. Amendment 2 as read by the clerk. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Now, my last amendment. The most difficult one, Bill. Number 1, change the level of funding from 30 to 35 to 25 to 30.
Okay. The amendment is changing 30 to 35 to 25 to 30. Right?
Yes.
Is there discussion?
There's no second.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Okay. Discussion.
Just
the proponent
briefly.
first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bill. Just briefly, the 8-member towns' fund balances run from 0.8% to 20.2%, and they average about 13%. There's I'm not looking to spend. I know how important a fund balance is. I know how important a plan is. But when we're told that the upper number is the minimum level before any funds exceeds the target, target really becomes now 30% and not 25%. But they want a level, so I'm proposing the level 25 to 30. I'm not looking to spend it. We go 35, we go 40. I would say that, right now we're at 33%. If we had a cap of 25 to 30, we become 30. We then might consider funding some of our OPEB trust liabilities, which Wall Street and our bond agencies should be ecstatic about. So in some fashion, sometimes the money can be better invested. But that's the long and the short of it.
Okay. Do you want, Buddy, do you want to speak? Or do you want
I'd like to ask if we can have,
That's the question I was
Hookup
gonna-
come back up and talk about the
For-
massive
for-
capital
for-
improve-
for
the
full
massive
dis-
capital
for full
improvements plan.
disclosure.
Yeah. No, but I mean, the
I
big
understand.
capital
Let him
improvements
speak.
Plan, the liabilities we have with our infrastructure.
Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the reason that in consultation with senior management, 30 to 35 was put in the policy is the rating agencies publish medians, and they publish national medians, they publish Connecticut medians. So currently, the MDC is rated AA in that range, AA3 by Moody's, AA by S&P. Prior to 2016, prior to the hardship that the state faced and that Hartford specifically faced, the MDC had a higher rating. We were AA1, AA plus. And the goal of senior management at the MDC is to get back to that rating, because obviously the higher the rating you have, the lower your interest cost. So our thought is we target a median that's above where we are right now. We're AA, we want to be AA plus. So in looking at the actual published national medians, that 30 to 35 was about the range to get there. Now, in the state of Connecticut, the commissioner is exactly right. In the state of Connecticut, there is a wide range, and 13, 13.9, 15, that's sort of the median for municipalities in Connecticut. So they're not at 30 to 35%. They are 13 to 15%. So that is correct. The reason why the district is different than the municipalities is the municipalities' property tax is the major source of revenue for municipalities in Connecticut. The reason the national median is so much higher than the Connecticut median is because there are municipalities in other states outside the Northeast that aren't based on just property tax. They may have city sales taxes or other more volatile revenue streams. That's the reason why the national median is higher than in the Northeast. So the thought for the MDC is that the MDC is not just based on, your revenues are not just based on property taxes. We see a couple of differences. One, and the town manager of Hartford made a good point earlier in that, in a way, having 8 property taxpayers rather than thousands of property taxpayers, it's certainly easier to collect. You know, going to 8 people is a lot easier. West Hartford, I'm sorry, the town manager of West Hartford. There are certainly easier things about having less taxpayers. However, the flip side of that, and the rating agencies always tend to be negative, is you also have more concentration. You know, back in 2016 and in early 2017, when there was the risk of non-payment, that certainly got the rating agencies all jiggled up. So there is that other aspect of it. The other thing is property taxes are not your only source of revenue. The water fund, of course, is based on water rates and the revenue from the sale of water. And there's certainly volatility in the volume of water that you sell. The other thing that's a little bit different about the district is you have a lot of capital assets and you're very capital intensive. Rather than spending rather than people and the programs that you run being the majority of your budget, you actually have a very high percentage going to debt service because you have to keep up those capital assets. About 35% of your budget goes to debt service. So that is because you have to, you have all these bonds outstanding and you have to continually issue bonds to keep up with your infrastructure. So for those reasons, you have some risks that the municipalities don't have, and that was the thought behind the 30 to 35%.
Thank you for the capsule generation. Okay. Buddy, do you want?
No, that's, I
Thank
just
you,
wanted to have him, repeat that, and so that the whole district board could hear it. We heard it at the Board of Finance, so I want to make sure everybody here
No
heard the whole
problem.
thing. So-
He's.
And Adam, the savings that we would have had if we were the AA one.
On July 24th, which is the date you priced your 2019 bonds, the market, if you had been a AA1, that rating that we're trying to achieve over time, would have been about $750,000. I think it was about $740,000 would have been your debt service savings. You had the higher rating.
Right. Less than what we will pay.
Mr. Chairman,
Hold on, let's go. Who's first? Go ahead. You haven't spoken.
So this is a reserve issue, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I heard earlier today, and someone fill me on this, where our millions of gallons per day is going from 65 to maybe 46. Over what?
Oh, it's gone from 65 down to about 50.
Year over year?
No.
5 years?
15, 20 years ago.
Okay, so we know which direction that's going, and then what that means to revenues. And, in trying the last couple of years that I've been on this commission, this board, I've been trying to grasp and understand all the complexities of the MBC and all the pressures on us as commissioners and as a quasi-agency working for not only the customers, but the taxpayers.
We're not quasi, we're
So,
municipal.
all right, or municipal, all right. But I feel like I'm riding a snail to perdition because I'm listening to obstructionist negotiations with agencies who don't want to pay us, intractable politics, and stultifying legislative or legalities, let's say, in trying to get things done for our customers and also the taxpayers, and in trying to do a good job for them. So when I hear an issue like reserves and, diminishing the reserves, and plus what council talks about as far as possible other issues that could cost us a tremendous amount of money and all the uncertainties surrounding this, I don't understand, frankly, why we want to put ourselves in a position of having less of basically a rainy day fund. And I understand what the differences are being pointed out between us as an agency and the municipalities. But I'm getting kind of tired of having really no direction from which to, or into which to make any progress because of all these different kinds of issues. And frankly, I think that if we want to make an impression on the customers and the people who might be listening to this tonight, or any night for that matter, is that we stand up for them and work for them and show them what we're doing. Not only in making sure that the money is there if we need it, and that they're not going to have to make up the difference at some point, hopefully, but that we're going to take a much stronger, much more solid position in trying to get through these issues that we've been discussing tonight, and frankly, during my entire 2+ year tenure here, where I frankly don't see any change. So I'm frustrated, and would rather spend all my time doing, what the best thing is for our customers and for the taxpayers, and have them see it rather than just what's going on as in this meeting tonight.
Thank you, Chairman. I just had a couple of questions. So what percentage weighting would the rating agencies give to the level of fund balance when they're evaluating?
There's not a specific percentage that would be assigned to this. As was brought up earlier tonight, it is one of a number of factors. And, in all honesty, the 25 to 30%, just because that's the national median, does not mean that's the right number. This suggestion is based just on the facts that are available from the published research. It falls into two categories. One category is management, and that's simply having formally adopted policies is part of their rating and management, which is one of the four major areas. The other that it falls into, obviously, is the financial. How are you doing financially? Because having reserves provides you with budgetary flexibility should there be a problem. So the policy falls into management, and what's in the policy sort of is going to help you have budgetary flexibility, which is part of how the rating agencies rate your financial stability and flexibility. Because you're a hybrid of a taxing authority as well as a revenue producing authority, that complicates it even a little bit more, because the four rating categories that are used straight for general obligation tax supported debt is a little bit even different than a utility that has revenue. So it's not black and white, which is why there's no number I can tell you this is what you want. It's very much a decision that needs to be made.
So then, another point you made was how when the city of Hartford had the issues and bankruptcy was looming, that, was a red flag for this. Didn't the state legislature take any action so that?
They did take a substantial action as far as Hartford was concerned. They took $570 million in debt off of the back of the city of Hartford, which had a dramatic effect. It should have had a dramatic effect. But in the last bond rating, our rating didn't change, and that was one of the major issues that was dragging down, because you're only as strong as your weakest link, and Hartford was our largest customer, our largest city, and there was no change from the rating agencies relative to $570 million being eliminated from Hartford's debt. So that's a question that I don't understand, why the rating agencies took the position they took by not recognizing that $570 million.
Well, it's a lot
It
harder
could
to
have
go
been,
up.
it could have been the fact that they also have the right to go back, and I don't know whether they can withdraw the legislation. Was that a factor?
I would say there were a couple of things. S&P continues to state in their rating reports that it's untested, while they see all the value of 17-1, the legislation that aided the MDC. It's untested. Of course, we don't want to test it, but that's hard to convince the rating agencies. The other thing is that one of the stronger pieces is the interception of the pilot payments to come to the MDC if the city were not to pay its taxes, or any member municipality. When that first passed,
Excuse me,
year,
you're saying that it was tested in court, not tested in court.
or that it was used, that they didn't pay and you administratively were able to get the money from the state. They're saying, yeah, it looks good on paper, but we don't know how it would administratively work.
Okay.
The other thing that happened the first year, which is unfortunate, was that was the year the state was late in passing its budget. So the rating agencies looked at 17-1 and said, that's great, but there's no appropriated pilot to Hartford because the state doesn't have a budget. It's the nature of their job to go to what's the worst thing that can happen for the bondholders. The other thing is, I heard the commissioner say, and it's exactly right, you get downgraded very fast, you get upgraded very slowly over time. It's a long climb back up.
Okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner?
By this time, we all should know we are in different business than town management. I was in town 38 years. The point is that we have experts. There are rating agencies. They advise you. And then we start questioning on something hypothetical thing, which in my opinion is a waste of time.
So can I just
Go ahead. You want to
make
finish your
one more?
questions, please,
Yes,
Denise?
please.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about the savings that would be realized if it were a higher rate, you're talking about savings over the life of the bond, which would be 20-odd years. So
Yep, correct.
maybe not as impactful. So my point is, I think there's room, based upon the fact that it is just the 8-member towns, that we look a little bit more like a regular municipality than we do some of the places that are not so dependent on property taxes. And I think it's going to be really difficult for some towns to feel like they only have 7, 10, 12% balance, and we're going to them through the ad valorem or whatever to come up with 30%. My other concern is once you have that down in writing in your policy, it takes out your flexibility of ever saying, you know what, we're going to use our money this way this time. Because once you dip into the fund balance, that then becomes a big red flag for the rating agencies. So I am certainly supportive of maintaining, these levels. I'm just concerned that you put in that 30 to 35%, it removes the flexibility of MDC. And as our budget grows each year, then that number is going to go up each year.
Buddy?
And I don't think it hurts to say, why don't we start off here, go through our budget year, and, really look at it in
Start off
conjunction
here with what, the amendment or?
the amendment, with
Okay,
saying,
I
let's
just,
be a little
so
bit
everybody
more,
knows you're talking, right,
as,
as the amendment is.
yes.
Okay. Who is next?
I would just say that our target is whatever the rating agencies are, however we get to AA+1 to, get the type of rating that we had before we had this issue. And I don't think that that's, I mean, I think any lender is going to look at, if they have the debt spread out amongst a lot of equal partners, then that cuts down on the liability. But if they have their debt spread out between a smaller number, or if they have one debtor that owes them more than 20% of their liabilities, they're going to get anxious about that. I'm, so the 8-member town thing, it's helpful that we do only collect taxes from the 8-member towns. We don't collect them from thousands of taxpayers. But, it also reduces that to 8-member towns. Any one of those 8-member towns has a problem, then, the MDC's got a big problem because it's a big part of the ad valorem. So that part I understood. The only other thing I would say is that, having, sat through, a lot of budget workshop hearings here over the years and gone through the issues, well, what the differences are between the towns and the MDC. And the MDC is capital intensive. The MDC is all infrastructure. The MDC has huge liabilities that the towns don't have. And, and we also have a responsibility now with the federal government to spend $100 million a year, Scott. It's $100 million a year on the Clean Water Project, and we have our capital improvement program for $75 million a year. So we're really an agency that's spending a lot of money, and Wall Street's going to get interested in what the guarantees are on revenue to pay that debt off. So
We call the amendment.
Well, I think we've got to let everybody that hasn't spoken. I mean, let's let everybody speak. Okay, go ahead, Gary, and then we'll go around.
With all due respect, my mind's not made up. I've got some basic questions about how this would work. I have 3 questions. How much would, if we're looking at 30%, how much would that be in dollars? Or like say on the current year's budget. Number 2, let me just get my questions out and you can answer them.
Why don't you take one at a time?
Okay.
Go ahead. Is it 26 million?
Yeah,
We're at 30, Chris, we're at 33% or end of 18, which was about 26 million, right?
23.2 million.
Yeah, 23.2.
That's 33.7%.
So look, you might short circuit my other questions. We currently have a fund balance of that?
Yes.
Yeah, 33.7%.
And it makes more sense
That
to say
really-
what the actual cash is.
Takes away my
rather than
other 2
percentage.
questions. So actually, my last question was how long would it take to get to, say, 35%?
We're there.
But, and so we appropriate that as part of the budget if we have a surplus.
If we have a surplus, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
My question was actually answered, which is that we're currently
Hey, speaking of,
currently at 33%. Why would we come up with a policy that puts us below that? We were trying to maintain or improve our bond rating. So I would side with our fellow commissioner here who said, we have it's good to have the policy. I commend management for coming up with it. And I don't see any reason why we would pass an amendment which would reduce the percentage below what we currently have.
Further discussion? not, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Can I see a show of hands? For those that are for, let's count four first. Who's for it? 1, 2. Well, I thought we had more. Okay. 1, 2. Okay. All those against it. The nays have it. The amendment fails. Is there further amendment to the motion? If not, are we ready for the question? Without objection, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes as amended. Okay. 9B, fringe benefit vehicle tax.
What do we do on that one? We discussed it, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Who's gonna present this?
Vehicle tax.
Look forward to
No,
the
there you go.
Board of Finance, Mr. Chairman. The resolution is.
This is the policy of failure to pay taxes.
Vehicle tax.
Is the board ready for, is there discussion? Comfortable? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item C, operating budget transfer, increased tax budget. This is
There's two different.
I and double I. Okay. So we're going to take up I1 of C. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. This is yours, Bud.
Actually, did you do this one?
This was from the Board of Finance on August 28th.
Yeah, this is not, so Alan, I don't know. Yeah. Al, you were chairing the meeting.
What is this?
It's related to a shortfall in property taxes. The assumption for this year was $20,000 underneath, so the transfer is
It's
to
an
pay
internal
property taxes.
transfer within the budget of $20,000 based on a projected $20,000 shortage on the tax. Those are taxes paid to towns.
I believe that passed in the Finance
Yeah,
Committee
it did.
without objection.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item double I. Increase independent consumer advocate budget. This is with a unfavorable recommendation from the budget committee, is it not?
Motion didn't carry at finance, it was tied, so it didn't go forward.
Mr. Chairman,
It's before the body, though. What's that?
if, I guess I'm asking if it would be out of order. I would
Table.
propose that we pass this. I'm sorry. I would propose that we pass the increase independent consumer advocate budget. And I would ask that my colleagues consider it seriously. I think that it's one of those things that I think from a number of standpoints, including the fact that I think that we need to be concerned about the cosmetics of this situation with regard to the public face of the MDC. I think we've got enough battles to fight and enough issues that we have to consider. And I'm not saying that it goes down easily or well, but we're talking about $20,000 here. And I'm not saying that it's chicken feed or that I'm treating it lightly. But I think with regard to the other issues that we have here,
I think this is a one that we're better off taking a statesman-like approach and passing it and moving on to other more serious issues.
Mr. Chairman, can we do that just as the committee of the whole? We can do that and just doesn't matter. The Board of Finance's, rejection, it doesn't really matter. We can just do that here.
Yes, the board.
Doesn't have to go back to Board of Finance.
No, this is the main body that makes the decision. It's the Board of Finance makes a recommendation
Right.
for the total policy. It's the board that makes the ultimate decision as to whether you're going to move money, amend money, or anything else. This is an amendment to an existing budgetary item. It's an internal transfer, is it not? And this is the authority to transfer that.
I would add to what the commissioner said, by saying that, I do know that we have a difficult budget year ahead of us, and Consumer Council has explained that, he would use additional time, to work on that with us, and I understand that. And I also hope that, that the consumer advocate is going to be supportive of the things that we need to do, and I know that he has in the past. It's not like his job to be an adversary to us. It's his job basically to be supportive of what appears to be right and what serves the customers and consumers of the MDC. So, given that this is a significant, because of the integrated plan, this was a significantly more intensive year dealing with the budget. I could accept this. That doesn't mean that, and I'm sure that David would tell you, that doesn't mean that this is going to change the budget and forever be that amount. But for this year, he's asked that we reconsider this amount. So I was in favor of it at the Board of Finance, and I say that I'll be in favor of it again here. So
Further discussion?
I hope this line does not become incremental budget as it happens every time. So basically, this is one-time increase, and then it will fall back to required minimum of $50,000. And the board can decide at a future date if there was more activity and desires to give more money, then be so it.
Well, I agree, Commissioner. What was pointed out by the opposition to this motion was that it's a 40% increase and 40% increase. So by the $20,000 added to the 50 is a 40% increase. But I think, I think Mr. Silverstone explained that he did spend a lot more time this year and expects to spend even more, going into the budget season. So
That was the discussion from the
Yes.
advocate. Is there further discussion? Yes, sir. Commissioner?
The independent counsel was done through state statute, correct?
It was.
All right. And did the state statute say how much money that this should be? Was it in the words of the statute?
Let me let our attorney.
Yes, it was 70,000 the first year, 50,000 the second, but giving this board discretion to increase that.
So the first year, so the fiscal year of, was last year a full year for the?
It was.
Yes.
It went into effect in the last
January of 2018.
calendar
year.
Yeah, right, which is our fiscal year.
And this year, he's looking to spend the same amount of. Now,
I believe the testimony in the committee was that he feels that this will be at least as significant as last year was, but he doesn't actually know that, but he's saying that he believes. I can't put words in his mouth.
I wasn't here for the
He's here.
testimony.
Go, stand up.
The other thing I want to clarify, if I might, Mr. Chairman, his duties, the first year was $70,000. That was to take into account startup costs that he incurred in 2017, in October, November, December of 17, because the effective date of the actual law was October 1, 2017. So the annual salary was $50,000 for 2018 for that fiscal year. He had the additional 20 for set up an office and other things. And he stayed within that budget in 2018, but there's circumstances changed as he has described for 2019.
So,
Please speak into the microphone.
Dave Silverstone. So in 2018, I'm doing this from memory, but it was someplace, I spent someplace between 65 and 68. I probably should have emphasized, and I apologize for not, I get paid by the hour.
That's right.
So if I put the time in, then I send the bill and you pay the bill. If I don't put the time in, then I don't send the bill and you don't pay the bill. So that's why it's difficult to say how much will I spend between now and December 31st. My estimate is that I'll get close to that $68,000 number. But I don't know exactly, and that's why I'm asking for the same as last year. To answer an earlier question, this only covers 2019. I presume that the 2020 budget will revert back to 50, and that's fine. And, if in the middle of the year it's getting expensive, I'll let you know. But it goes year to year. I think that's the key point.
Further discussion? Does anybody want to speak that hasn't? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Silverstone, if this does not go through and you're relegated to 50,000 and you get to 50,000 on December 4th, what do you do?
Well, then I'll have to make a determination as to whether I think my ethical obligation is to carry on and not get paid, or whether I'm free to stop working.
Okay, I trust the income projections that you're coming up with here, and I have a feeling your ethical side you would continue to work regardless. So I would be in favor of the bump to 70, with the presumption that if you use 60, well, we save 10.
That's what he's saying.
Sorry, what was that?
In other words, if you only use 60 by virtue of hourly pay, fine.
I think he made that.
But I don't,
absolutely
right, exactly. So I have no problem at all with this.
Rich?
Tonight's hours billable. Motion.
He's going to run over the budget if we don't rate we're going.
I'm in favor.
Further discussion?
I want to formally second the motion. Al, you made the motion, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'll formally
The chair
second the motion. I'm
feels
sorry, I didn't
that
do
there
that.
was a second, so.
I don't think I actually said that, but
Well,
go
no.
ahead. I do now.
It's
so.
up to the chair to determine whether they feel that there's a
Okay.
second in there. No further discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay, can we have a show of hands? All those in favor? What do we got, bro? Passes. Well, all those in opposition? Passed. Okay, move on. 10, Personnel and Pension Insurance Committee, consideration and potential action regarding, wow.
Chairman, we didn't
can
take
take
any action. We referred those.
Okay,
to,
I'm sorry.
Back
This,
to staff.
could we put this, you want to put it on the table or just refer it back? What we-
Well, it's been, we'd like to refer it back to staff.
We have to do that. Is there a motion to refer back to staff?
Second.
Okay. Without objection? Is there an objection? No objection, we'll refer this back to staff. A, that's A1, aye. B, transfer of pension funds from Wellington Management to AQR Capital Management. Recommended action to receive the report and adopt a resolution. Moved and seconded. Ray, you want to?
Second.
Just that Hooker Holcomb recommended that we have a second large cap fund. At our last pension meeting, we transferred one-third of our
We're gonna make 9 o'clock.
I know it.
dollars from Wellington.
Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor? I'm sorry.
I couldn't hear you. What'd you say?
We had 60 million with the Wellington Fund, large cap.
Yeah.
Hooker Holcomb, when we hired a third party to review our pension, had one recommendation, and that was that we not have it all in one fund.
We want large cap fund.
Cap fund.
So you split it in
okay?
two.
So now we took a third of it and we put it into another fund. So David Lee came back to the committee with 3 possibility funds. We went over them and we picked AQR Capital.
Wait, so you took a third of the large cap fund
Yes.
and you put it into another large cap fund?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And that was their recommendation, not that we couldn't have the 60 million in large cap, but they felt that it should be more diversified with a couple funds instead of having it all in the Wellington.
So what's the allocation?
100.
Well, it's $60 million approximately that we have in large cap right now. I think it's 30% of the total fund. 30 or 35.
So there's what, 18 million that you're transferring in?
20.
20, I'm sorry. Okay. Is there discussion, further discussion? Go ahead. Commissioner?
I think I know the answer to this question, but there are no commissions paid for
Transfers,
recommendations for fund investments, are there?
right?
Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Okay. Committee on Organization, number 11, Committee on Organization, Consideration, and Potential Action Regarding Appointment of Chief Financial Officer for the Metropolitan District Commission. Is there a
Moved. The Committee of Organization last week met.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, okay. Go ahead.
Last week, the committee met. We recommended Chris Martin for the position.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chris, congratulations. Well deserved. Okay. Item number 12. Consideration and potential action regarding resolutions recommending that the district board proceed with condemnation proceedings in furtherance of the Clean Water Project Contract Number 5 on the following properties. Can we, these are all combined? Okay. 868 New Britain Avenue, Hartford, 878 New Britain Avenue, Hartford, 888 New Britain Avenue, Hartford, 894 New Britain Avenue, Hartford, 927 New Britain Avenue, West Hartford, 939 New Britain Avenue, West Hartford, and 168 Dart Street, Hartford. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
Quickly, just one correction. New Britain Avenue is 876, not 878.
I'm sorry, 876. 876. As corrected. Question? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 13, referral of petition for water service to Water Bureau for, can we take these together?
Yes.
A, 85 Pennywise Lane, Glastonbury. B, Burnham Street and Sherwood Drive, East Hartford. Is there a motion to adopt?
So
both?
moved, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and seconded to adopt A and B. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add that I'm hopeful that this is going to go forward. Burnham Street and Sherwood Drive in East Hartford are almost the last two streets. I don't know if Sue's not here. Is Sue still here? Sue, what do we have in East Hartford? The coverage has got to be over 98% if we get these, right? I mean, I think 98% of all the homes or more. I think Prasser Drive maybe is. Yeah, there may be one little dead-end street that doesn't have MDC water or fire protection on. But these two streets added to it would just about bring 100% coverage to the town of East Hartford. And by the way, the customers on Burnham Street and Sherwood Drive, most of them are also our sewer customers already. So they would be, they would be part of they would be paying the clean water charge. So right now, I think as sewer customers only, they don't pay the clean water charge. Am I correct?
Yeah. Okay, discussion.
I would just add, we recently lost a house on Sherwood due to a fire. And part of that reason was because of lack of water mains. And we had to bring tankers in, and of course, too little too late. So
Just could say.
that's facilitating the need to bring the water in.
Demonstrative. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question. So how does this affect, Burnham Street is the border between South Windsor and East Hartford. How does that affect the South Windsor residents on that side, on the other side of the road?
I mean, how does it
There are
affect them?
customers, already South Windsor customers on the other side.
On
of
that
Burnham
side,
Street,
in the
just a
general.
different section. They'd have to pay
They
the
get it.
assessment like anyone else. They'd have to pay the assessment to get it.
I mean, it's a good question, Sue. Do we have, are the people in South Windsor, have they already been assessed? Or will they be assessed as part of this project?
So we're just getting this petition, so we have to look into it, but I know we discussed it with John, and we talked about, you might have to have a public hearing in East Hartford as well as South Windsor if you are assessing those people as well, because you're
So
gonna
they
be
will-
serving them.
They will, if the project goes forward, the people who are in South Windsor will be assessed if it's approved, right? They have the right to connect, but they will be assessed.
Thank you.
Just an FYI, the town's also petitioning CNG for gas lines to be put down.
I'm sorry.
And that's okay. I was just going to say, the letters we got from East Hartford are very encouraging, and that's something we should be getting from Glastonbury if we want to proceed with those projects.
Okay. You got a little different problem.
Yeah, but that's what we were asking for. We want them
Okay,
to support it.
and is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Item number 14, referral petition for sewer service for 377 Simsbury Road, Bloomfield, to the Bureau of Public Works. Motion is to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 15. Consideration and potential action regarding settlement of pending litigation in executive session. There's two of them. Can we go into executive session for both of them?
Yes.
Okay, that would be A, Ryan versus the Metropolitan District Commission. Acadia Insurance, Old Windsor Station LLC versus the Metropolitan District Commission. Is there a motion for a special session? Before we go in, could we move for, no, let's go into executive session first.
Okay, and the reason is it's pending litigation. And I would need Chris Martin, Chris Stone, Kelly Shane, and Bob Zeich to remain.
Myrtle.
And you, John?
John.
Okay.
Okay,
John
is there a motion to go into executive session? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Go into executive session.
Jen?
Can you get the button?
Go ahead.
They're good.
Okay.
Let's go, Bill.
Is there a motion to come out of, are you all set?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Bart? Okay, I'm sorry, it's a motion for item 15A, Ryan versus Metropolitan District Commission. The motion is recommended.
So move the resolution.
It's moved and seconded. Discussion? Not? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item B, Acadia Insurance, Old Windsor Station LLC versus the Metropolitan District Commission. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Opportunity for general public comments. Commissioners' question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Alicia Sharmut. I am a resident of Newington. I am the executive director of Rivers Alliance of Connecticut, formerly with the Connecticut River Conservancy. First of all, I'd like to compliment the MDC on the videos that you showed at the beginning of the meeting. Those were fantastic. This is exactly what the MDC needs to communicate to the public, first of all, why they have to pay for water, and second of all, why they have to pay for wastewater, which is harder to communicate. And I thought they were extremely effective. So thank you for producing those, and I look forward to sharing them. In regard to the long-term control plan, there's some information both with the long-term control plan and PFAS that I'd like to counteract. The DEP told the MDC that they would not accept a long-term control plan that includes pushing the compliance schedule out 30 more years. Now, if there are other written communications between the MDC and DEP where DEP had changed their mind, I'd like to see them. But the fact is, it's the compliance schedule that is the big problem with the long-term control plan. And it does not meet the terms of the consent order. Second, I just want to let everybody know, PFAS is a suite of chemicals. They're a suite of chemicals that behave very differently. And none of these suite of chemicals are currently on the toxic substance inventory at the federal level. So this is an emerging contaminant. DEP is doing what it can to try to react to this, but the fact is the federal government is just now taking action to do the research to get it on the toxic substance inventory, which is what you saw was the federal action that's being taken. We are so far from any of these chemicals being put on some sort of national pollution discharge permits. So we're looking at something that might take 50 years before the wastewater treatment facilities are expected to filter these out. And as far as DEP having a filter that filters out all of these chemicals, if they do, they can pretty much solve the state's budget deficit by selling this, because even filtering it from drinking water, engineers can't find one solution to filter out this complete suite of chemicals. Thank you.
Further comment? Okay, commissioners' questions and comments. Oz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's late. I'll be very quick. At our last Water Bureau meeting, there was an exhibit provided giving the cost for a water user that had an assessment for a new water main put in and a connection. Typical water user residential is about $628 per year. Amortizing the cost of the assessment and the improvements to the connection would bring the typical water bill up to over $3,000 per year. Given that information, I'd like to request that the Water Bureau evaluate the MDC program for amortizing new water main assessments. We currently have a program which is 15 years at 6%. I'd like the Water Bureau to consider increasing the amortization from 15 to 20 years and reducing the 6% interest rate to something closer to what a home equity loan would be at 4%, which would still be about 150 basis points over the MDC's 2.5% borrowing rate. So I'm just requesting that that topic be put on the agenda for the Water Bureau at some point in the future. Thank you.
Bud?
Mr. Chairman, well, we just heard from, is she gone? Did she leave the, oh, you're still here. So it's not my understanding that it's only a schedule. I schedule for the Clean Water Project. The integrated plan was more than just extending the schedule for payment. It had major changes in the plan, which changed the original long-term control plan. So I'm not in that understanding. So I hope at our next meeting, maybe you can explain that. But
We can discuss that.
Yeah,
There's
I'm-
significant differences relative to that.
I'd be surprised if Deep actually said that, but maybe that is what they didn't say that to us.
Okay, any further comments? Alan, and then,
Mr. Chairman, a question on the PFAS. I believe that Scott, maybe it was some other staff person, but I believe, Scott, you said that the public had been notified, warned, whatever, not to eat fish out of Connecticut River.
Deep identified that to the public.
Say-
Deep identified that to the public.
Okay,
That's
so,
in your materials in the Hartford Current article.
okay, so Deep made that pronouncement.
Public comments to
So-
the Hartford Current.
So my question has to do with commercial fishing, such as Connecticut River shad, or any other fish that may be taken commercially at the mouth of the Connecticut River. Do we know if anything has been done in that regard?
No idea.
Okay, fair enough.
we've been fishing for those for a long time. Any further comments?
Yeah,
Ray?
just that I think we learned a lesson tonight. Don't skip your August meetings.
Correct.
We've been here since 2 o'clock, some of us, in subcommittees, so, and staff, of course, what,
Thank you,
12,
thank you for
13,
your
14
service.
hours? Well, I get my 50,000 a year.
Okay. Thank you for your service.
Be careful, you're on TV.
Yeah.
No further comments, no further questions, the appropriate motion is in.
Adjourn?
Without objection, we stand adjourned.
Yeah, right.
We had a meeting that went till like 2 o'clock in the morning. Torpy was like in the morning. You've fallen asleep.
Hey, drive safe.
Yes, definitely.
Connecticut River, yes, just that stretch of Farmington River.